Barbarians are absolutely ruthless warriors, inhabiting a desolate, frozen wasteland that is teeming with horrific monsters. Surviving solely on the flesh of beasts, they possess godlike strength, powerful enough to rip those same monsters apart with their bare hands. Their presence is so overwhelmingly terrifying that a mere glance is enough to drive ordinary men insane. Our protagonist awakens within the body of one of these savages, essentially becoming a fantasy version of Saitama, capable of obliterating beasts and even shattering entire mountains with a single punch. After living among this primitive tribe for some time, he eventually grows tired of their mindless ignorance. Desperate for intellectual stimulation, he sets out to find a civilized human to converse with. But who would be foolish enough to venture into this monster-infested hellscape? Unexpectedly, a noble's carriage and its escort are trekking through the white abyss. When a mercenary whines about the biting cold, the muscular blonde captain warns him to bundle up or die. Another guard voices his regret, arguing that crossing this deadly terrain isn't worth the gold. However, the captain instantly silences the dissent, reminding them that they all signed the contract. His companion shivers, remarking that he never imagined the conditions out here would be this brutal. Inside the carriage, a concerned butler checks on his charge, addressing the noble lady of the Akasha family directly, asking if she is holding up all right in this weather. Milena assures him that she is doing fine. When an escort outside loudly complains about freezing to death, the butler scoffs at the lack of discipline. However, Milena chides him for being too harsh, noting that these men volunteered to protect them. She even suggests letting the guards inside to warm up for a moment, but the old man staunchly refuses the request, reminding her of the extreme dangers lurking within this white wasteland. When Milena asks if he is referring to the local monsters, the butler recounts the legend of an emperor who once sought to conquer the entire world. To achieve this, the emperor marched into the white wasteland with a massive army, remaining there for decades. Yet after his empire collapsed, he returned alone, leaning on a stick and rambling like a madman. He claimed the wasteland was teeming with beasts, but insisted that the true threat was not the monsters, but rather the barbarians. The butler quickly adds that this is likely just a myth, as nothing has been proven. Milena counters that the emperor's warning carries weight, especially since the monsters he described are real. They discuss how, despite the lack of confirmed sightings regarding these barbarians, a certain eccentric figure has told countless tales about their existence. Just then, the captain commands the convoy to freeze. His eyes lock onto a silhouette approaching them from the distance, straining his vision to catch even a faint glimpse of the stranger. He turns to his men, announcing that he bears both good and bad news. The good news is that the entity moving toward them appears small in stature. The bad news, however, is that he cannot determine if it is a human or one of the Emperor's legendary barbarians. But against all expectations, as the barbarian closes the distance, he politely explains that he was simply wandering about, sick of looking at his own kind. Catal admits he never expected to run into outsiders here, greeting them with surprising warmth. He asks the captain if this is a merchant's carriage, and if they are the hired muscle protecting it. When the captain confirms his suspicions, the barbarian suggests they turn back immediately, though he adds a mocking remark, certain they won't heed his warning. Catal then shifts his attention, asking if someone occupies the carriage. While the guards are too paralyzed by fear to utter a single word, the barbarian makes a shocking proposal. He wants to be hired as a mercenary. The captain stammers, asking for clarification on what Catal just said, and our guy simply repeats himself, offering to escort them across this harsh white wasteland. Disbelieving that a legend come to life merely wants a job, the captain asks if he holds any hostility toward them. Catal calls his bluff, stating that if he were truly an enemy, they would already be in their graves. The captain turns toward the carriage, asking Lady Milena if she heard the exchange. He awaits her command, but the noblewoman simply asks him about the likely outcome. She wants to know if they could win a fight against the giant, but the captain refuses to even entertain the thought. Hearing this, Milena orders him to accept the proposal and hire the barbarian immediately. The captain turns back to the towering warrior to deliver the verdict. He announces that this noble inside the carriage has accepted his terms. Catal is pleased by the news, though the sudden smile that cracks across his face is terrifying enough to make everyone present nearly wet themselves. Catal tells them to relax before promptly demanding an audience with their employer. This sudden request instantly puts the captain back on edge. He warns our hero that he'll regret it if he tries anything funny. The other mercenaries argue that they should intervene and stop the brute. However, the captain calls them fools, reminding them that their mistress has already given her consent. Inside, the butler panics as he hears the approach, but he is powerless to stop it. Catal politely asks for permission to enter, though it feels more like a demand. He climbs in and squeezes next to the uncomfortable butler, telling everyone to chill out since he means no harm. Even Lady Milena seems visibly anxious at his imposing presence. Yet, she composes herself to warmly greet him, while Catal comments on the carriage's temperature. He notes how difficult it must be to keep a space like this so pleasantly heated. Milena attributes this strange phenomenon to the workings of magic. This revelation immediately piques the closet otaku's interest. Catal warns her that the region is treacherous and their survival odds are low, which is why he's offering his protection. However, he mentions there is one condition, causing the mood to instantly turn tense. Milena maintains her composure and asks the man exactly what he wants. The barbarian lets out a confident smirk. All he requests is knowledge regarding the world that lies beyond these snowfields. Milena finds the request surprisingly simple, but the barbarian assures her that it is a fair trade for their lives. A drop of sweat rolls down her cheek as she realizes she doesn't really have a choice, forcing her to agree to his proposal. The butler clearly disapproves of the deal. While Catal pivots to ask the lady for her name, she gracefully introduces herself as a noble daughter from the House of Akasha. Catal returns the courtesy, expressing his gratitude for their upcoming journey together. Back on Earth, he had always fantasized about living in a fantasy world, and that wish was granted in the strangest way. He was suddenly isekai'd, waking up in the body of a dim-witted ashen barbarian stranded in the snow. He never had time to question how it happened, as surviving the freezing wasteland and fighting endless waves of monsters was a nightmare in itself. To stay alive, he rallied the primitive barbarians, formed a clan, and took command. Time flew by without warning, and every plan he devised to escape the tundra proved useless. But everything changed when a system panel appeared, promising liberation from this frozen hell if he completed its quests, finally breaking the invisible force that had kept him trapped. Over the years, stray travelers would occasionally wander into his isolated domain. From them, he confirmed that the world beyond the cursed snowfields was indeed teeming with the fantasy and magic he had always dreamed of. Fueled by this revelation, he doubled his efforts, relentlessly grinding through quest after quest. He was desperate to escape this frozen hell, and he quickly realized that information from the outside was a precious commodity. That is precisely why he bargains with Milena, offering to guide her group to safety in exchange for knowledge. Until this moment, every encounter ended with terror or drawn blades, as people treated him like a mindless monster. He is genuinely relieved to simply talk, compared to the mindless barbarians he usually deals with. Conversing with a civilized human is incredibly soothing. Suddenly, Catal shifts the topic, asking the woman if her caravan is transporting a shipment of weapons. Surprised by the specific question, Milena asks what led him to that conclusion. He explains that the distinct clang of metal against metal was a dead giveaway, before asking if a war is raging beyond the frozen lands. Milena's expression darkens as she confirms his suspicions. The Empire and the Kingdom are currently locked in a brutal conflict. She explains that while the massive empire seeks total conquest, the kingdom has miraculously managed to hold its ground. She attributes this stalemate to the legendary swordmaster and the hero, who stand as the guardians of the borders. Intrigued by these titles, Catal asks what kind of supernatural abilities these warriors possess. Shocked, Milena asks if he is truly ignorant of the mysteries, but the barbarian reminds her that he has never left the snowfields. The merchant explains that while her knowledge is limited, she knows for a fact that mystery is a tangible power in this world. Only a select few can tap into it, and their mastery determines which of the 5 ranks of strength they are granted. The lowest ranks consist of those who can merely sense the presence of mystery. Above them are those who can utilize it, but the pinnacle belongs to the elite. These masters can fully manifest power as mana or aura, earning prestigious titles like spirit summoners, mages, or knights. She explains that the ranks beyond that defy human comprehension, known simply as transcendents, beings capable of bending mystery through sheer will alone, much like the fabled swordmaster. Above them stands the hero, an entity rumored to possess power great enough to warp the fabric of the world itself. Milena adds that even a third-rate practitioner, one who can barely sense these mysteries, is still a force to be reckoned with. Intrigued, the ashen barbarian interrupts, stating his desire to meet such powerful figures. Catal has lost track of exactly how long he's been trapped in this accursed place, but now the urge to escape burns within him more fiercely than ever before. Staring at his reflection in the mirror, he makes a silent vow. No matter the cost, he will find a way out. Suddenly, Milena shifts the topic, asking him point-blank if he really is a barbarian. Catal confirms his origins, wondering if his reputation has perhaps preceded him. She brings up an ancient legend, recounting the tale of the Emperor in great detail. However, Catal abruptly cuts her off. With a smirk, he reveals that he actually remembers that man visiting the fields once, long ago. Back then, he just dismissed the guy as a raving lunatic. When Milena looks confused by his words, he clarifies that the ridiculous legend she believes in might actually be the truth. Changing the subject, he questions their logistics. Why choose this specific route while hauling such a massive shipment of weapons? Milena's expression darkens, her demeanor turning somber as she quietly admits that they are currently buried under a mountain of debt. Her family has traded for generations, but jealous rivals sabotaged their deals until they were left bankrupt. This trip is their last desperate attempt to save the family name. Connecting the dots, Catal deduces their true objective. She intends to sell these weapons directly to the kingdom. Milena is stunned, curiously asking how he managed to figure that out so quickly. Catal deduces that if the empire is advancing as claimed, the kingdom must be desperate for weaponry, willing to pay a premium to restock their armory. That desperation is exactly what makes traversing this treacherous route worth the gamble. He points out that her bypassing the safer paths proves the two nations share a border, necessitating this risky shortcut. Milena stares in disbelief, her prejudice shattering. She'd always believed barbarians were mindless savages devoid of logic. But hearing him deconstruct the geopolitical situation with such clarity makes her question if he's truly a barbarian at all. Suddenly, the carriage lurches to a violent halt, accompanied by a deafening crash from outside. It's an unmistakable sign that they are no longer alone. Weapons drawn, they scramble out of the vehicle, only to face a massive sludge-like monster staring back with blood-red eyes. Fear paralyzes the group, but the blonde guard manages to stammer out the creature's identity. A black slime. Curious rather than afraid, Catal asks for confirmation on the species. The noblewoman nods grimly, confirming it matches the descriptions from ancient records. She explains that historically, few who tried to conquer the White Snowland ever returned, but the survivors explicitly warned of these black slimes in their journals. Turning to their guide, the blue-haired woman asks if Catal has any experience with the beast. He flashes a delightful smile, noting that they are quite chewy and make for an absolutely delicious snack. Her face twists in disgust as she realizes he sees the predator as nothing more than a meal. He sarcastically offers to let her catch it for dinner, a proposal she vehemently rejects. Almost on cue, the slime lunges forward, having politely waited for their conversation to conclude. Panic erupts and she screams Catal's name for help, but he remains completely unmoved. He stands there with a stoic, expressionless face, watching the chaos unfold. He coldly reminds them of their deal. He promised to protect their lives, meaning he won't lift a finger until they are on the brink of death. Terrified, the noblewoman demands to know exactly what he implies. Smirking, Catal assures her that the squad can handle a beast of this caliber, though his true motive is to gauge the outsider's strength. Suddenly, the gelatinous monstrosity materializes directly in front of the guards. The blonde captain immediately barks orders, commanding his men to raise their shields for defense. One of the mercenaries instantly complies with the directive. However, the defense proves futile against the creature's overwhelming mass, and the unfortunate soldier is violently knocked backward. Refusing to back down, the ponytail-sporting warrior leaps into the fray. But he is brutally repelled, coughing up blood as his weapon clatters uselessly to the ground. Analyzing the battlefield, the captain realizes the slime is limited to linear movement. He screams for them to scatter and coordinate their attacks from different angles. Heeding the command, the warrior in the green cloak launches a high-flying aerial assault, following up with a heavy swing that finally inflicts visible damage. Sensing the beast's vulnerability, the captain presses the advantage, slashing at the creature with his blade. He orders the team to target the core, realizing that superficial wounds won't stop it. Through a barrage of synchronized strikes, they manage to expose the monster's heart. Seizing the moment, they deliver a fatal blow that shatters the core, causing the massive entity to lose its form and dissolve into a puddle of sludge. Although they were initially taken by surprise, the guards quickly realize they've won, celebrating their first victory in this frozen wasteland. The triumph brings a smile to Milena's face, but before they can even catch their breath, a massive white bear lunges in front of the carriage, prompting a shout to aim for its neck. Reacting instantly, the group launches a coordinated attack, striking at once to finish the beast off. One of the guards scoffs, suggesting that the terrifying tales of this wasteland are nothing more than the bluffs of madmen. Their leader silences them with a stern warning, reminding the clumsy fools that they still have half the journey ahead of them. However, the man with the green hood turns his skepticism toward Catal, questioning if the legendary fighter is truly as strong as the Emperor's claim. He accuses Catal of merely freeloading, and insists that they should witness these supposed capabilities firsthand. The blue-haired lady listens intently to their bickering, asking what exactly they mean by a test. The guards gather around her carriage, formally requesting permission to speak their minds. The green-hooded man speaks up confidently, emphasizing that they are going above and beyond to complete her quest. Milena steps out to express her gratitude, acknowledging that they stood by her side in this deadly land when no one else dared to. But the hooded man interrupts her gratitude with a pointed question, asking if Catal truly deserves such VIP treatment, considering he hasn't lifted a finger to fight since joining the caravan. The lady of the Akasha family realizes what kind of evaluation they want, casting a doubtful glance at the captain, who quickly denies involvement. reminding them that he has no say in the matter. Meanwhile, Catal simply watches the drama unfold with a smirk on his face. He steps out of the vehicle and asks if they'd like a demonstration of his power, though one guard notes there's no way to test him right now. But as Catal reveals his imposing, muscular frame, he calmly announces that they are about to have another visitor. Right on cue, a dark shadow with glowing eyes looms behind them, its voice booming that it will feast on these tasty, weak mortals. The carriers spin around in horror. They are greeted by a massive serpent with beaming red eyes and razor-sharp fangs, which taunts them to struggle for their lives. It claims that their resistance will only make them that much more appetizing. Overwhelmed by fear, Milena covers her ears in panic, while the mercenaries squeeze their eyes shut, freezing in place and praying not to be noticed. But Catal walks right up to the beast, radiating intense purple energy, and orders it to back off now that these people are under his protection. The great white snake grows uneasy the moment it recognizes Catal, asking why he's here and citing the ancient snowfield rules about trespassing. However, he quickly brushes off the complaint and tells the serpent to stop acting so uptight. The snake lets out a dramatic roar, attempting to reassert its dominance. It insists that Catal has no right to speak to it that way, but our hero isn't interested in wasting time on an argument. He charges in without saying another word, and lands a heavy punch, deciding it is high time this oversized reptile learned a lesson. The blow connects with enough force to violently shake the entire ground around them, leaving everyone nearby completely stunned and frozen in place. Milena yells out to ask if Lord Catal is all right, to which he replies with total calm. He assures them he will finish this quickly and join them soon. He leaps back into the fray, cloaked in an overwhelming aura of power that feels almost unnatural, and slams the arrogant snake into the ground with a single decisive strike. Moments later, Catal rests comfortably inside the carriage while the others shiver outside, begging for forgiveness, prompting the barbarian to look away and mutter that suspicion of strangers is only natural. Still, the roles have completely flipped, and now even the butler is forced to trudge through the snow. With that matter settled, Catal leans back and asks the girl why she ventured out this far alone, despite knowing the grave dangers involved. She opens up, revealing she is the eldest daughter of Lady Bellica, one of Lord Kaisa Kakasha's concubines. Her mother was married off to fill a political gap, only to be discarded once she had served her purpose. She confesses that neither of them is treated as family. They are viewed as little more than disposable servants. Although she hadn't planned to share so much, the truth spills out before she can stop it. She admits she took on this grueling journey to prove her worth and carve out a name for herself in the family. Catal smirks, noting that she is both clever and ambitious, and perhaps a little greedy too. But before the conversation can go any deeper, the mercenary captain bellows out, announcing their arrival at the final destination, pointing toward the lush green land awaiting them just ahead. As the group prepares to disperse, the blue-haired lady thanks Catal, explaining she'll return through the Empire when the time is right. But before she departs, she brings up a specific comment he made earlier in the carriage, specifically regarding her sharp intellect. Catal doesn't back down, repeating the sentiment without a hint of hesitation. He proceeds to deconstruct her entire scheme, connecting the dots with terrifying accuracy. He realizes she intends to carve out a spot in her family hierarchy and climb her way to the very top. Impressed by his deduction, she simply nods in silence. To Catal, this narrative is all too familiar. An illegitimate child fighting for recognition within a noble bloodline. It's a classic trope he's seen 1,000 times in his past life as an otaku. Realizing this barbarian is far sharper than he looks, she wonders if she can harness his power, offering him a position by her side. However, Catal politely declines the offer, insisting that he still has unfinished business to attend to here. Understanding his resolve, she hands him a pendant instead, telling him to seek her out if he ever decides to venture into the outside world. Catal accepts the token with a genuine smile, taking the gift without prying further as the butler offers a respectful bow of farewell. With that, they part ways, leaving their reunion in the hands of fate. From that moment, 5 full years pass by. And with that, Catal finally completes his 784th quest. This officially grants him the right to leave the snowfields behind and step into the outside world he has been longing for all along. He basks in the scent of the lush grass and the gentle sound of the river, feeling as though he has finally been summoned to heaven after enduring a living hell back in the snowy wasteland. Turning back toward the icy plains one last time, he curses the place, hoping with all his heart that he never has to return. He fantasizes about the pleasures of this magical world, a fervent desire that kept him alive all this time. He views the world beyond the snowfields as a realm where miracles are commonplace, and his gaze soon lands on the first civilized village he has ever encountered. He recalls trying to teach those idiotic barbarians about building shelter, but they preferred sleeping in holes dug into the snow. Having sorely missed the structure of actual human civilization, he wonders how he should go about greeting the inhabitants of this new world. He resolves to act like a gentleman, and begins his approach toward the village. Meanwhile, over in the settlement, an elderly elf declares to his kin that this location is now their new home, and instructs them to begin unpacking their belongings. However, one of the elves asks if this place is truly safe, and the elder reassures them, explaining that he has selected a remote location that is completely inaccessible to humans. He explains that the treacherous snowy fields surrounding them act as a natural deterrent against intruders. They don't even need to worry about monsters, since there are zero records of anyone surviving that frozen wasteland. To ensure absolute safety, they spent months constructing an ancient magical barrier that disguises the village as a simple forest. And if all else fails, they are protected by a powerful elven queen capable of repelling any threat. Right on cue, Katal casually strolls through their impenetrable barrier, as if it were nothing more than morning mist. He feels a faint resistance, similar to walking through a spiderweb, but simply shrugs it off and keeps moving. Suddenly, he spots a young elf girl standing just ahead. She looks absolutely devastated, as if she's been separated from her family. She frantically scans her surroundings, visibly consumed by panic. However, the moment her eyes lock onto the towering human greeting her with a friendly smile, her brain completely shuts down from the sheer shock. Her knees give out, and she collapses right on the spot. Katal catches her before she hits the ground, utterly confused by her reaction. He figures that if he returns the lost child to her village, the famously gentle elves will surely be grateful and welcome him with open arms. Blushing at the thought of being a hero, he carries her toward the settlement. But the moment he steps into view, the entire village erupts into pure chaos. The girl's mother instantly breaks down, sobbing as if she's watching a monster snatch her child away. The elder freezes in place, likely regretting his earlier boasts about the barrier's invincibility, and after a moment of stunned silence, he finally snaps back to reality, screaming that the perimeter is breached and demanding the queen's location, though she seems to be away on patrol. Katal attempts to de-escalate the situation, insisting that he means them no harm. But his words are met with threats, while the paranoid elder runs through a dozen worst-case scenarios, assuming the human is a fully prepared raider who has been stalking their village for weeks. Wrongly accused of being a kidnapper, the poor barbarian racks his brain for a way to clear his name. Deciding actions speak louder than words, he gently wakes the sleeping child, who wakes up with tears still streaming down her face, and softly encourages her to run back to the safety of her parents. Unfortunately, all the terrified girl sees is a looming monster, so she screams and flees in panic, leaving Katal genuinely hurt and shocked, since he always considered himself to be a rather handsome fellow. He tries once more to explain to these stubborn fools that he isn't their enemy, but the elder simply declares that with the hostage secured, there's no reason to hold back, and immediately orders his troops to open fire. The baffled barbarian stands motionless, amazed that despite their famously large ears, the elves can't seem to listen to reason. These elves are proving to be far more aggressive and savage than Katal ever imagined, making the legends of their peaceful, benevolent nature feel like a complete fabrication. Still, he tries to rationalize their violence as a natural defensive reaction to an intruder. Arrows rain down on him in relentless waves, yet every single projectile bounces off his skin harmlessly. With a simple clap of his hands, Katal unleashes a shockwave so powerful that several elves are swept completely off their feet, sent tumbling through the air like leaves in a gale. The village elder watches the scene unfold in silent disbelief, while Katal continues to insist that he means them absolutely no harm. He worries that this display of strength has only deepened their fear. But just as he considers pulling back, a sudden spike in temperature alerts him to a threat. A flaming arrow speeding toward him from behind, its blaze cutting sharply through the cold air. It turns out the queen, who had been away on patrol, has returned to defend her kin. Marsalia, the regal leader of the Leaf clan, demands an explanation for the chaos. Wasting no time, the old elf points an accusing finger at Katal, claiming the outsider attacked their village without provocation. Katal pleads with them to just let him speak, but the sight of him standing tall without a scratch leaves both Marsalia and the elder visibly unsettled. The queen spits out an insult about how disgusting humans are, then lunges at him, fully confident she can crush an intruder like him. Katal begins to suspect their aggression isn't just fear, but a symptom of the deep-rooted hatred between elves and humans. He remembers a lesson from the snowfields. People only listen once you land a solid hit. With that strategy in mind, he braces himself. Suddenly, the queen launches a devastating attack, manifesting her energy into the shape of a mighty dragon. But with barely any effort, Katal punches the construct head-on, creating an impact that literally tears through the space around the queen. It leaves him wondering if he should have held back just a little. The elf queen takes the full force of the blow and comes crashing down to the ground. Realizing he surpasses the transcendent level, she grits her teeth and orders her people to flee. She chooses to stay behind, sacrificing herself to slow the barbarian down. She screams at him, acknowledging the human's overwhelming strength, but swearing she will never let him succeed in his twisted goals. Katal realizes he's being ignored again, and the situation has gone from bad to worse. As her final trump card, the queen summons a blazing bull spirit named Piego, fully confident that this guardian beast will eliminate the intruder. However, the barbarian lights up with excitement at the sight, since every monster he fought in the snowfields was hideous and weird. He's never seen anything quite like this magnificent beast, openly admiring the bull as it stands wreathed in roaring flames. Marsilia wastes no time, commanding her summon to obliterate the man standing before her. The spirit appears to be a high-grade fire entity, older, prouder, and far more powerful than the usual fodder, as ancient spirits tend to be. Marsilia knows her strength alone wasn't enough to summon this. She had to beg another tribe for help to seal the contract. She never imagined she'd be forced to use it here, but now she orders the beast to fulfill its oath. The flaming bull, steady and stern, asks if his task is simply to annihilate the human standing there. But even the spirit begins to sweat nervously the moment he actually lays eyes on this so-called human. Meanwhile, our hero wonders what this creature actually is, seeing a summoned beast in real life for the first time. Katal is honestly just amazed by how strangely cute and majestic the summon looks to him. The elf queen turns to Pago, identifying the intruder on their sacred lands and demanding his immediate execution. Hearing this, Pago casually decides to incinerate the guy to ash for being foolish enough to cross the sacred race. Meanwhile, our boy just stands there like it's no big deal, mostly because he has absolutely no clue what is going on. Pago flares up, getting ready to launch his devastating attack, and dashes straight at his target with blinding speed. Yet Katal remains motionless, making zero effort to even attempt to dodge. As the bull spirit smashes into him, a massive fiery explosion erupts on impact, leading the elf queen to assume the intruder is finally dead. He casually stops the charging spirit with just one hand. Accustomed to battling wild beasts daily, this monstrous form actually puts him at ease, allowing him to strike without the need to hold back. He unleashes a strike with such overwhelming force that it feels as if the earth might split in two, resembling a massive volcanic eruption beneath their feet. Yet in reality, this display utilizes only a fraction of his true power. Once the dust finally settles, the elf queen, having barely survived the blast, stands paralyzed before him, shaken to her core by the insurmountable gap in their strength. Defeated and desperate, she begs him to spare the lives of her clan. However, he calmly informs her that he never intended to harm them. His unexpected mercy leaves the queen completely astonished. As they engage in a proper conversation, she realizes he holds no hostility. Guilt washes over her for their rush to judgment, and she apologizes for the grave mistake, realizing they attacked the savior who had just brought one of their children safely home. Katal graciously accepts the apology, understanding their paranoia regarding humans, though he admits it's unfortunate they didn't attempt to talk first. Still confused, the queen asks for clarification on whether he is truly unaffiliated with the humans chasing them. He explains that this is his first time seeing an elf, as they do not exist in the white snowfields. The mere mention of that frozen region shocks her. He adds that outsiders know him by a specific title, the Ashen Barbarian of the Wasteland. The queen is left speechless, as she believed it impossible for any normal person to survive in such a desolate place. Concerned, she asks if there are others capable of leaving the wasteland just as he did. He admits he isn't entirely certain, but he highly doubts anyone else possesses the power to pull off a feat like that. He theorizes that this wasteland operates on strict rules binding even beasts like the Great Serpent, yet his quests somehow allow him to bypass them. That ability makes him a singular, incredibly rare anomaly in this world. Hearing this explanation, the queen finally breathes a heavy sigh of relief. He then casually changes the subject, asking if her cute summon is okay considering he split it in two with a single punch. She assures him the spirit is fine. As beings of pure nature, they simply return to the spirit realm when forcibly unsummoned. Grateful, she asks if there is anything she can do to repay him, apologizing for how rude her people have been. He pauses, taking a moment to think the offer through. Curious about her power, he asks if it's possible for other beings to form contracts with spirits as well. She shakes her head, explaining that under normal circumstances, it is impossible. However, humans with an exceptionally high affinity for nature can sometimes forge those bonds. She adds that if he is truly serious about the attempt, he must travel to Elfo Sagrado. This is the Holy Land where the Lord of the Elves resides, and he may be willing to help facilitate a proper contract. Excited by the prospect, he asks if a human would really be allowed inside their Holy Land. She explains that with her personal introduction it won't be an issue, though he must keep everything a total secret. Internally, the queen reflects on how Elfo Sagrado is the ultimate dream destination for every Elven researcher. Revealing it to a human is a massive risk, as the location is guarded more closely than their own lives. Nevertheless, she decides to place her faith in him. She hands him a glowing crystal to serve as his credentials. She warns him that once he arrives, the Elf Lord will personally test his worth. She remains confident that he will pass, wishing him the best of luck. She then formally introduces herself as Marcelia Carusia, Queen of the Leaf Tribe, and asks for his name. He identifies himself as Catal the Barbarian, and after confirming his destination, he dashes through the forest, heading straight toward the target. He quickly closes in on the border of the territory controlled by the Kingdom of Gehent. The guards on watch begin to panic as they spot a massive cloud of dust racing toward them at breakneck speed, prompting them to scramble and prepare for battle. Upon arrival, Catal cheerfully tells the guards that he is genuinely pleased to meet them. Hearing his voice, the terrified guards instantly recognize him by his gray hair and the prominent scar etched across his chest. They realize they are facing the infamous Ashen Barbarian. They immediately shout for him to halt, threatening to attack if he takes another step. But he tells them to chill out, assuring them that he is not their enemy. When the guards demand to know exactly what he wants, he simply points a finger toward the wall, a gesture that understandably leaves them a little confused. He explains that he simply wishes to visit the domain for a short while, and nothing more. Later, inside the captain's office, the officer questions if his only goal is truly to pass through. He replies that he plans to stick around for a while, though he's unsure of the exact duration, before introducing himself as Catal. When the captain asks for any identification or references to verify who he is, Catal initially denies having any. However, he suddenly remembers the crest Milena gave him before they parted ways. He presents the item to the guard, casually asking if it's sufficient proof of his identity. The guard stares at it blankly, failing to recognize the symbol and asking what it represents. Catal explains that it belongs to the House of Akasha, gifted by a blood relative, which the captain recognizes as the merchant family from the Denian Kingdom. The captain notes that it's a rising power, one that has been expanding rapidly ever since their new head took over. Although the crest appears authentic, the guard explains that he can't accept it as valid ID since it originates outside the Kingdom of Gehentra. Even so, he's willing to make an exception and let Catal pass, but only on the condition that he first proves he poses no threat to their domain. The guard points out 3 other travelers waiting to enter, and orders Catal to form a temporary party with them to clear a nearby dungeon. Catal realizes the request is incredibly simple for someone of his skill level, so he accepts the terms without a single complaint. The guard then adds a final stipulation. Upon their return, Catal must report everything that happens inside. He immediately deduces the true purpose. The group is being forced to spy on one another so the guards can weed out anyone suspicious. The captain looks genuinely surprised by this deduction, questioning if Catal is actually a barbarian. He admits he always viewed them as mindless brutes, and Catal is the first one he's met who possesses any intellect. With everything clarified, the guard tells him to join the others so they can get moving. The scene shifts to Alessandro Terronis, a self-proclaimed paladin who laments the tragedy of being forced to dungeon crawl with a pouch-snatching rat. The thief, Cassin Hark, gets annoyed by the whining and asks if Tyrannus is projecting his anger because some other thief once ran off with his life savings. That comment sets Tyrannus off, and he gets irritated that a petty thief dares to insult a paladin like him. But Cassin shoots back that he is not even a real paladin, because if he was then, he would not be here in the first place. He also says Tyrannus is just another bottom feeder who clings to the title because his name sounds dumb. Tiredness becomes visibly mad on hearing that, and points his sword at the thief. But Cassin asks if he seriously thinks that his beat-up armor is going to save him, right as they are about to start fighting. The cleric Hayes politely asks them both to stop, and they listen even though they clearly want to throw down. Hayes starts wondering if it is really okay to dive into a dungeon with these 2 maniacs. As the minimum number of people required is 4, that means another person still has to arrive before they can go inside. Suddenly the door opens, and the guard steps in, announcing that their final member has just arrived. The thief jokes that hopefully it is not another whack job like the so-called paladin, and the guard just tells him to go look for himself. As Catal enters the room with a quiet but dominating aura, all 3 of them feel chills and freeze up, overwhelmed by fear as he casually walks in. With a cheerful smile that does not match his build at all, he tells them it is nice to meet his new party members. While everyone is still processing, the guard steps back and says they should talk things out among themselves since he will return shortly. After that, our boy suggests they start with introductions, and says that he is Catal the Barbarian. Then he turns to Cassin, who nearly chokes as he says he is a thief, while Sir Tyrannus announces that he is a paladin. Catal gets excited on hearing that because he knows paladins usually use holy powers. But Tyrannus quickly lets him down by saying he is a special kind of paladin who cannot use any of them. Next, the lady shyly introduces herself as Hayes, a cleric who serves the god Colossia. He asks why she is hesitating so much even though clerics are proud of their job. and she explains that it is because Colossia is the lord of lies and deceit, which makes him not very popular among the others. As they continue talking, the captain opens this door again and tells them they will be heading out now if everyone is ready to move. The whole party follows him without delay, and they finally arrive at the entrance of the dungeon. There, the captain shows them the front of the dungeon and explains that it is a 3-floor dungeon filled mostly with undead monsters, and their mission is to clear it completely and return with the required proof. With that, Katal kicks off the raid and casually asks Kassan if he has a plan in mind. Hearing this, the thief suddenly gets nervous and addresses him as Sir Katal. So our boy tells him to drop the Sur since they are a team and should leave behind all formalities and fancy titles. Kassin hears that and decides to just act normal. So without hesitation, he says Katal and the warrior will hold the front lines while he checks for traps, and the nun supports them all from the rear. Katal is honestly impressed by the clean formation, and the other two agree as well. So with that, the team begins their exploration. Inside the dungeon, Hayes quietly thinks to herself that the place is far too dark, while the thief gets suspicious because there are none of the usual traps or tricks around. Suddenly, he tells everyone to stop moving because there are monsters nearby. He cannot see anything clearly, but there are bone fragments scattered on the floor, which are the remains of skeleton monsters that attack if anyone steps too close. Kassin realizes the guards lied about this being a simple test. They are using this high-level dungeon to quietly execute any suspects. Meanwhile, Katal feigns complete ignorance of the gravity of the situation. Kassin quickly explains the threat, noting that these undead monstrosities will keep fighting even after losing their limbs. Furthermore, being made entirely of bone grants them exceptionally high physical defense. He orders Hayes to ready her magic immediately. He signals Tyronus to raise his shield and warns Katal to stay sharp, as this trial is far deadlier than anticipated. Kassin instructs the group to distract the enemies, giving him an opening to sever their necks, the only reliable way to put them down. However, Katal simply steps forward, closing the distance to the nearest skeleton. The undead creature suddenly springs into action, causing the rest of the party to brace for combat. But before it can even attack, Katal delivers a casual yet devastating slap, striking with such force that the monster is instantly pulverized into dust. The entire group freezes, staring in utter disbelief. Katal turns back to Kassan wearing a bright, innocent smile. He cheerfully agrees that aiming for the head works wonders, leaving poor Kassin to laugh nervously in confusion. That was definitely not the tactical precision he had in mind. Skeletons are reinforced by dungeon mana, making their solid bones nearly impossible for an average swordsman to cut through. Conventional logic dictates chipping away at the neck until it snaps, not obliterating the skull with a bare-handed slap. Kassin already knew the barbarian was strong, but this level of raw power is far beyond anything he anticipated. He seriously begins to question if Katal is even human, while the group stands frozen, staring at the pile of dust. Meanwhile, our protagonist simply suggests they keep moving as if nothing happened. Still shaken, they rush to his side, though Tyrannus and Hayes are silently praying they make it out of here alive. As they venture deeper into the dungeon's depths, Katal suddenly spots a lone skull resting on the floor, surrounded by scattered remains, causing the other three to instinctively brace themselves. They assume that this time, they might actually need to lend a hand in the fight. However, Katal turns and politely requests a favor, leaving the trio confused about what he could possibly need from them. He insists on fighting alone to test a theory, and the group steps back, curious to see what kind of experiment he's planning. Katal flashes them a quick expression of gratitude, just as one of the undead constructs begins to reanimate. He watches with genuine fascination, wondering aloud how the bones piece themselves back together. The skeleton immediately launches a full-force swing, aiming to slice him in two with its rusted blade. But Katal effortlessly catches the steel between two fingers, snapping the weapon in half like a dry twig. He taunts the creature, asking for its next move, but the mindless undead shows no hesitation. It leaps into the air, committing to another desperate strike. Our hero smoothly sidesteps the attack and firmly grabs hold of the skeleton's arm. He taunts the scrawny thing, asking exactly what it plans to do next. Without hesitation, he slams the severed arm into the floor. The impact is so violent that it instantly turns the bone to dust. The skeleton just stands there, staring at its missing limb in visible confusion. Then it tries to act tough to save face. It squares up, posturing like a gangster. It raises its remaining hand, desperate to fight for its undead life. But Katal's sadistic bullying is far from over. The skeleton foolishly charges in again, but our barbarian grabs its remaining hand and rips that one off too. He instantly reduces it to dust, just like the first one. The poor skeleton still refuses to quit, flailing its broken stumps at him. Katal grabs hold and crushes the limb for good, actually impressed by the creature's intelligence and resilience. Meanwhile, the rest of the party just watches in stunned silence. They actually start pitying the poor skeleton as it gets completely clowned on. Hayes feels a chill run down her spine as she watches the scene unfold. While Kassan and Tyrannus look like their souls just exited their bodies, they realize what a monster a real barbarian is, seeing Catal smile like he's starting his villain arc. The others stare in horror as the finale begins. Catal uses sheer brute force to rip the head straight off the skeleton's body and carelessly tosses it onto the ground, looking like a complete psychopath. He finds it amusing that the creature is immobilized without its head, before crushing its skull under his boot like a villain. Witnessing this brutality sends a chill down the party's spines, especially when Catal casually apologizes for the delay after acting like a total demon. Terrified, Kassan nervously insists it's no issue at all, politely telling Sir Catal to take as much time as he needs. Oblivious to their fear, our hero simply nods, expressing gratitude for their sudden politeness. He suggests they head deeper, and the trio agrees immediately, acting like hostages held at gunpoint. After exploring for a short while longer, they finally reach the staircase leading down to the dungeon's second floor. Upon entering the new level, Kassan suggests they take a break to rest before pushing any further. Catal agrees, noting that it would be best for everyone to catch their breath. Hearing this, Kassan is overjoyed that the terrifying barbarian has benevolently granted his humble request. During their downtime, the trio huddles in one corner while Catal sits silently in the other, creating an awkward silence. Suddenly, our hero breaks the tension to ask a question about the dungeon, causing everyone to snap to attention. Looking slightly embarrassed, he admits that his knowledge regarding dungeons is actually quite limited. Hayes panics slightly, quickly reassuring him that the desire to learn is a virtue she also shares. With the floor open, Catal notes that this dungeon is located dangerously close to the territory, and asks if anyone is concerned about the monsters inside escaping. Hayes explains that monsters generally remain contained within the dungeons, though rare outbreaks are immediately reported and neutralized. Kassan chimes in, noting that since dungeons are treated as unpredictable natural disasters, their physical forms vary wildly, sometimes appearing as subterranean caves, while others manifest as looming towers, yet they inevitably spawn near densely populated areas. This explanation helps Catal understand why this specific dungeon appeared in this location. Hayes adds that local lords usually assess the threat level before deploying guards, though adventurers are often hired to clear them as well. Processing this information, Catal finds it intriguing that dungeons never spawn directly inside settlements, a fact Kassan confirms as an absolute rule. Eyes lighting up with greed, Catal asks if there is a payout for a successful conquest. Hayes nods, explaining that a powerful boss guards the final floor, and defeating it yields massive rewards, especially in a dungeon of this scale. A wide grin spreads across Catal's face as he mutters that it's exactly like a video game. When the nun questions his strange comment, he quickly dismisses it as rambling, before pivoting to ask who actually creates these structures. Taken aback by the query, Hayes replies that no one builds them. They are simply accepted as natural phenomena. But Catal argues that there are too many inconsistencies for that to be true. The fact that they always manifest near people implies they are demanding to be explored, almost baiting humanity with treasure. That kind of design feels far too deliberate to be a random act of nature. Hayes realizes that his logic is actually quite sound, admitting she never considered that perspective, and even Kassan agrees it sounds suspicious, admitting that since these concepts were taught as absolute truths, he never saw a reason to question them before. Kassan, however, is baffled by how a barbarian possesses the intellect to challenge the fundamental laws of their world. According to common knowledge, his kind are supposed to be nothing more than brainless savages. Yet it is becoming increasingly clear that Catal defies every stereotype in the book. Our protagonist finds their little philosophical debate quite intriguing. Deciding it's time to press on, he asks if everyone has recovered their stamina. Once the group confirms they are ready to move, he takes the lead, guiding them deeper into the dungeon's unknown depths. After wandering through the winding corridors for quite some time, the party suddenly stumbles upon a rare treasure chest. Kassan explains that this is a genuine labyrinth reward, but claiming the loot requires overcoming the complex lock mechanism first. Examining the device, the thief realizes that cracking a chest of this quality would require a master lockpicker. Since a professional of that caliber wouldn't be caught dead in a place like this, he assumes they'll have to leave the treasure behind. But Catal immediately turns to him, insisting he open it since lockpicking is literally the thief's primary function. He emphasizes that this is his one job on the team, causing Kassan to start sweating buckets. The problem is, if Kassan were actually capable of such a feat, he wouldn't be stuck in this trash-tier dungeon. In reality, he's just a discount ninja, a bottom-feeding peasant who isn't even acknowledged by the official Thieves Guild. However, he can't bring himself to admit that, especially when the barbarian is looking at him with such high expectations. If he admits that he can't handle the job, then all of Catal's excitement will instantly sour into murderous disappointment. and letting down a barbarian likely means ending up just like that pulverized skeleton. Left with no choice, he decides to give it a shot. He retrieves his lock-picking tools, while Catal hovers behind him, watching with the childlike glee of seeing a real thief at work. With the barbarian looming over him, Casson desperately tries to recall the techniques he observed while working as a porter for actual thieves. He focuses intensely, convinced that failing to open this chest is a one-way ticket to the grave. That overwhelming pressure inadvertently triggers his hidden skill, Cry of the Soul. Moments later, a faint click resonates, causing Catal to worry that he broke the mechanism. Instead, the lid slowly creaks open, and the sight is so relieving that Casson bursts into tears of pure joy. Hayes is stunned, believing only elite thieves can pick such locks, which convinces her that Casson is a true professional. Even Catal is impressed by the unexpected success, offering genuine praise for the job well done. While Casson plays it cool, in reality he has absolutely no idea how he managed to pull it off. He always prided himself on surviving, but realizing his latent potential makes him question if he's been living a lie this entire time. While Casson spirals into an existential crisis, Catal asks about the loot's value, and Hayes confirms it's enough to support a family in luxury for a month. Hearing this, a satisfied smile spreads across Catal's face. He instructs Casson to gather up the valuable rewards and carefully remove the items from the chest. However, the porter nearly wets himself when they catch him trying to sneakily pocket some of the gold. When questioned about his jittery behavior, he awkwardly denies everything, pretending absolutely nothing is wrong. Moments later, the group stumbles upon a random heap of bones scattered across the dungeon floor. Spotting 4 distinct sets, the barbarian volunteers to take on 3 of them, leaving the final undead warrior for the rest of the party to handle. The team agrees to the strategy, though they quietly wonder if this skirmish will even qualify as a legitimate battle. However, the moment they step within striking range of the skeletal remains, the bones rattle and reassemble themselves, ferociously roaring as they prepare to ambush the intruders. Everyone immediately shifts into combat stances, with Catal confidently taunting the enemies to bring it on. Casson charges in first, landing a clean opening strike. But just as the other 3 skeletons attempt to gang up on him, our protagonist casually grabs them, locking them in a bear hug to prevent interference. He warns the undead mobs not to interrupt, intending to observe how his teammates handle themselves in a fight. Casson dashes toward the lone skeleton, slashing at its neck with his blade, though the blow fails to shatter it. Seizing the opening, the skeleton swings back with a counterattack. Tyrannus successfully intercepts the blow with his massive shield. Meanwhile, Hayes casts Shadow of Confusion on Tyrannus' sword, using the enchantment to drive a devastating strike into the skeleton's nape. The attack lands cleanly, yielding immediate results. A jagged crack splinters across the monster's thick neckbone. Witnessing such seamless teamwork from a newly formed party genuinely impresses Catal, as it's rare for strangers to sync up so perfectly. With a casual motion, he crushes his 3 skeletal opponents into dust, and decides to sit back and watch now that the distractions are gone. When the trio notices him standing there, calmly observing the chaos, they realize the barbarian is testing them, and showing weakness now would be a fatal mistake. Desperate to prove their worth, they combine their forces against the remaining skeleton, leaving the creature to meet its swift and inevitable end. With the final enemy crumbling into dust, the 3 exhausted adventurers collapse to catch their breath. However, after assessing their average combat skills during the skirmish, Catal concludes that the humans who accompanied Milena were significantly stronger. As they descend to the 3rd floor, the density of skeletons increases drastically. But with Catal taking point and clearing the path, the party advances without facing any real resistance. And it feels nothing like a dungeon, because he makes the way too easy. After some time, they finally reach the deepest part of the dungeon, where the boss of the entire dungeon, called the Skeleton Knight, is sitting ominously on a throne. Seeing the Skeleton Knight up close, the other 3 are completely terrified, and Hayes is unable to understand why something like that would even be here. Catal asks if this skeleton is any different from the others they have faced so far, and she replies that it is much, much stronger compared to anything they have seen. She goes on to explain that the Skeleton Knight is a powerful monster who freely wields both a long sword and a heavy shield. They honestly have no chance against it unless they have a fighter at least on the level of an elite knight on their side, so their chances of surviving this fight are pretty much equal to 0 right now. Our boy gets curious and asks what happens if they cannot clear it and decide to retreat instead. Hayes explains that the territory will send a request for confirmation, and if it is confirmed to be a true report, then it will likely be dealt with by the authorities fairly quickly. Hearing that, our boy smiles to himself while saying that it sounds pretty reasonable, before he starts walking straight toward the Skeleton Knight. Seeing that, the other 3 just stand there, frozen in confusion about what exactly he plans to do. As he moves closer, The eye sockets of the skeleton knight suddenly glow a deep crimson red as it awakens from its long slumber. Noticing that a skeleton is already in its assembled form, our boy realizes the boss is different from the rest. Just then, the boss pulls back its sword, and Hayes quickly figures out what it is planning to do. So she immediately casts a barrier to protect everyone from the massive energy beam that fires from the skeleton knight's sword. However, she soon realizes her powers are way too weak, and it does not take long before the barrier shatters completely, leaving only Tyrannus to block the attack with everything he has, while Hayes gasps desperately for air. The paladin barely manages to hold back the devastating blow, but what really catches his attention is that a single strike from a monster has enough raw force to destroy both a magical barrier and a frontline tank, making it very clear that the edgy boss covered in heavy armor is definitely no joke. At that moment, the skeleton stares him down with a lethal, glowing glare. Then, without warning, it launches itself forward at breakneck speed. Yet, true to form, he remains completely unfazed and motionless. He delivers a casual jab, striking with such force that the boss's bones instantly vaporize. Hit with the impact of a speeding truck, the poor skeleton's upper torso is blown clean off. The spectacle leaves the rest of the party standing there, jaws dropped in utter disbelief. Meanwhile, the barbarian casually dusts off his hands, disappointed that the fight ended so abruptly. Suddenly, something else in the room catches his attention. He immediately shouts for Casson to get over there. Pointing to an ornate treasure chest resting at the back of the dungeon, he asks if the thief can pick the lock. Casson immediately shuts him down, explaining that the high-grade mechanism is far beyond his current skill level. He sighs, muttering about what a tragedy it is to find loot they can't even access. That is, until he watches the barbarian wind up and smack the wooden chest so hard it starts smoking from the friction. Tyrannus and Hayes look on in frozen shock. The barbarian just grins, declaring that rewards earned through violence are always the best kind, before telling Casson to handle the contents. The thief is baffled that someone just brute-forced a chest, wondering why he was even asked to pick the lock when smashing it was clearly an option. Anyway, with the loot secured, it's time to move. The party exits the dungeon, but the barbarian is caught off guard the moment he steps outside. Without warning, the entrance behind them completely collapses. Casson barely reacts, explaining that dungeons crumble once fully cleared, confirming they didn't miss a single secret room. The revelation that secret rooms exist only fuels his excitement, making him even more eager for future dungeon dives and the untold treasures waiting to be discovered. Back at the border, the guard is left dumbfounded when he sees the ragtag party return completely unharmed. Sweating bullets, he nervously asks the group for a status report, only for the barbarian to chirp up and declare the mission an absolute blast. Unsettled by this strange energy, the guard proceeds to the next phase, interrogating them individually to find dirt on one another. Hayes goes first, calmly stating that nothing unusual or problematic occurred during the expedition. The captain remains skeptical, pressing her on whether a savage barbarian should really be allowed within their borders. She hesitates for a moment, realizing the interrogation is a trap designed to flag potential threats. Next is Kassan, who firmly asserts that Katal isn't some mindless brute looking to cause trouble. The guard is baffled to hear that someone with such immense power didn't abuse it or terrorize his own teammates. Finally, it's Katal's turn, and he surprises the official by offering nothing but genuine praise for his companions. This completely throws the guard off, as he's used to parties blaming and trash-talking each other during debriefings. With no valid reason to deny them, he grants them entry, warning that they'll be exiled at the first sign of trouble. He then hands over a heavy sack of gold coins as their reward for clearing the dungeon. And seeing Katal's disarming smile, the guard doesn't even dare to skim a cut for himself. With the gold in hand, Katal immediately turns to his comrades, urging them to take their cut, though they initially try to refuse the offer. However, he insists, emphasizing that it's only fair since they conquered the dungeon as a team. He suggests grabbing a few drinks to celebrate their first successful mission together, and the others nervously agree, mostly because they aren't quite sure how to say no to the imposing ashen barbarian. As the group strolls toward the main gate, the guard captain watches Katal closely from behind, his suspicion growing with every step. He knows that anyone capable of one-shotting a dungeon boss possesses strength rivaling, or perhaps exceeding, an elite knight. Consequently, the guard quietly orders his men to keep a close eye on Katal, while he rushes off to report directly to the lord of the domain. Arriving at the lord's luxurious mansion, the guard is granted entry and steps into the private chambers. Inside, Luke Barkin, lord of the Barkin domain within the kingdom of Gehentra, calmly demands the reason for this interruption, prompting the captain to announce that the barbarian from the rumors has finally appeared. Shifting his attention, Lord Barkin turns to the guard captain and asks if he actually granted the barbarian permission to enter. The captain nods, admitting he did, assuming at the time that it wouldn't cause any significant trouble. Lord Barkin raises a brow, questioning what sort of problem has changed his mind. The captain explains that the barbarian appears far too powerful and might stir up serious chaos within the city. Intrigued, Lord Barkin leans in and asks just how strong this stranger really is, to which the captain reveals that the man obliterated a skeleton knight with a single blow. Hearing this, Lord Barkin's eyes shoot wide open in shock. Typically, a skeleton knight poses a lethal challenge even for trained knights. Yet here we have a mere barbarian. A class not exactly known for its intellect, managing to obliterate the monster with a single strike. Needing confirmation, Lord Barkin asks if this feat officially classifies the barbarian as a first-rate warrior. The captain confirms the high probability, prompting Barkin to ask if the stranger might be even stronger than that. And concerningly, the captain admits he can't rule out that possibility. This unsettles Lord Barkin, who realizes a barbarian of this caliber could become a massive headache, given their philosophy that might makes right. He orders the captain to summon the warrior, but the subordinate hesitates, questioning the wisdom of such a move. Barkin calmly explains that allowing someone this powerful to roam unchecked within their territory poses a threat to their stability, and meeting the man personally is the first step toward asserting control. The captain remains skeptical about the risk, but the lord reminds him that his personal knight is present for protection. He then turns to said bodyguard for a second opinion. The knight scoffs, claiming that a mindless brute stands no chance against his refined swordsmanship inherited from the legendary great swordmaster. Satisfied with this assurance, Lord Barkin commands them to bring the barbarian so he can deal with the situation personally. Meanwhile, Catal is sitting with his party, absolutely demolishing a meal. The others watch in stunned silence as he inhales the food like he hasn't eaten in years. He slams his empty mug down on the table. He cheerfully declares how amazing the food is and how much he enjoys the peaceful atmosphere, telling everyone the meal is on him so they should order whatever they want. A gesture that leaves his companions genuinely surprised. Turning his attention to Sir Tyrannus, he asks the man what sort of divine powers he actually possesses, especially since he didn't witness anything flashy when they cleared the dungeon together. The paladin scratches his head in embarrassment, explaining that he is still training and hasn't unlocked his full potential. Catal notes that it's a shame but decides not to press the issue. Instead, he shifts his attention to the cleric of Colossia, asking if there happens to be a temple nearby. She replies that it's highly unlikely given that Colossia isn't exactly a welcome deity. In fact, the public generally rejects her faith because it is associated with lies and trickery. Then, she stares directly at our hero and bluntly asks him how strong he really is. The sudden question catches everyone at the table completely off guard. He admits that he honestly has no clue where he stands in terms of official rankings. Since he hasn't been out of the wilderness for long, he asks what level a skeleton knight would actually be considered. The cleric explains that a warrior needs to be second-rate just to face one, and only a first-rate fighter could destroy it the way he did. Before they can dive deeper into the discussion, the cafe owner approaches their table with a nervous expression. He politely asks them to wrap things up for closing time, looking like he's about to pass out from fear. Catal simply offers the softest, most genuine apology possible. He quietly leads the party outside, turning to ask if anyone has plans lined up for the immediate future. But the moment the words leave his mouth, they all immediately blurt out that they do. They insist that they are incredibly busy and absolutely cannot stay. Catal finds it unfortunate but doesn't make a fuss, parting ways and hoping to run into them again someday. The others just stare back with that frozen, blank look of people desperate to escape the interaction. As the day winds down, Catal finds a comfortable inn, realizing this is the first time he has touched a real bed since arriving in this world. He finds relief knowing the dungeon loot was enough to secure a proper room, a comfort that feels like paradise after the frozen chaos of the snowfields. As he settles in, he ponders his future now that he has finally returned to civilization, dreaming of visiting legendary sites like the sacred grounds of the elves, the mysterious magic tower, or even the royal capital, until exhaustion finally drags him into a deep sleep. The following morning, a sharp knock on the door jolts him from his slumber. He quickly wipes the drool from his face and drags himself out of bed. When he swings the door open, the captain of the guard is standing tall before him. Catal rubs his eyes and asks what's going on, and the captain explains that the lord himself wishes to meet face to face. Catal lights up at the chance to meet the ruler, flashing an innocent smile and agreeing without hesitation. Still half naked, he tells the captain to wait while he gets dressed, leaving the man stunned by how casually the barbarian treats a royal summons. The scene shifts to the bustling streets of the lord's domain, where the bright daylight finally allows Catal to take in his surroundings. He is stunned by the city's beauty compared to the shadows of the previous night, realizing he truly lucked out by finding this place. Meanwhile, the captain walks ahead, visibly stressed as he wonders what the unpredictable barbarian is doing behind him. He decides not to look back, simply praying they reach the mansion before anything weird happens. Upon reaching the gates, the captain announces their arrival to Lord Barkin, who welcomes them inside, extending a hand in greeting. He introduces himself with calm authority, and Catal politely responds with a handshake, even bowing his head respectfully as he states his name. This leaves the Lord visibly stunned, as barbarians are rarely known for such manners, and he wonders if he has finally lived long enough to witness every anomaly under the sun. Recovering, he compliments Catal's etiquette and gestures for him to take a seat. Catal scans the room, his eyes filled with curiosity, finding himself impressed by the castle's design, which reminds him of medieval architecture back on Earth. But soon his gaze lands on the knight standing beside the Lord, and his face lights up with nostalgia at the familiar armor, reminiscent of the RPG characters he used to play. However, the knight notices the stare and misreads it entirely. He senses something dangerous, assuming the barbarian's intense focus burns with murderous intent. The knight tenses, his hand inching toward his blade to neutralize the threat before it can act. Before the tension escalates, Lord Barkin clears his throat, explaining that this meeting is merely to confirm a few details. Our boy nods without complaint, and the Lord begins the interrogation by asking where he comes from. Catal shrugs, noting the gravity of the question, and answers that he hails from a snow-covered wasteland, the coldest place known to man. His answer leaves both the knight and the Lord completely speechless. They exchange shocked glances, realizing that Catal might actually be the legendary barbarian from the tales. The Lord admits that such a story sounds utterly unbelievable, but Catal simply replies that it was a hellish place to survive, and the Lord's belief is entirely his own choice. Rather than pushing the subject further, Lord Barkin shifts the conversation to the burning question weighing on his mind. Just how powerful is this barbarian, really? Catal chuckles at the phrasing, noting that the question makes no sense since even he doesn't know his own limits. After hearing this, the two men share another loaded glance. Without missing a beat, the Lord proposes a sparring match between Catal and his knight to gauge his strength, offering a handsome reward while our hero tries to fully process the sudden turn of events. The Lord sets strict ground rules, emphasizing that this is not a death match and hoping the barbarian can actually show restraint, to which our hero gladly agrees without a moment's hesitation. The Lord and the knight stare quietly as Catal gets visibly excited at the prospect of facing a fantasy world knight blessed with mystical powers, eager to witness that power firsthand. To them, however, it seems the barbarian cannot contain his savage lust for battle, no matter how polite he pretends to be, which unnerves them both to their core. Finally, the long-awaited moment of truth arrives, and the sparring match begins inside the arena, where the two combatants take their places, standing face-to-face as rivals. Hoping to avoid unnecessary bloodshed, the Lord officially commences the duel, signaling the start with the ring of a bronze bell. The knight immediately boasts, telling Catal he should feel honored to witness such refined swordsmanship. Catal simply agrees, maintaining a demeanor of absolute calm. However, the knight takes offense, insulted that a lowly barbarian would dare stand so casually before him. Wasting no time, he lunges forward, eager to demonstrate the massive gap in their strength. As he prepares to thrust his blade, the weapon suddenly appears to split into three separate swords, catching Catal momentarily by surprise. At first glance, the triple blades seem like a mere illusion, but he quickly realizes that all three steel tips are dangerously real. As our boy weaves through the barrage, dodging every single strike, he wonders if such a flashy gimmick can even be considered true swordsmanship. The knight, misreading the situation, assumes his opponent is barely scraping by on luck. Impressed but impatient, he decides to end it with a final, all-out thrust. But in that instant, our boy simply lifts his hand and flicks the blade, shattering the steel into pieces, along with the knight's fragile pride. He then grabs the knight's armor, gripping the metal plate as if it were mere cloth, before effortlessly tossing him across the arena. This display creates a situation that makes Lord Balkan sweat bullets. The moment the match comes to an end, the Lord stares in disbelief, watching his finest warrior get obliterated in a single blow. Shaken by the terrifying strength the barbarian just displayed, he watches our boy turn and casually ask if they're done. Lord Balkan fumbles for words, struggling to process the impossible scene before his eyes. He realizes that anyone capable of flattening a top-level knight like this must be superhuman, at the very least. Though he still has no clear method to measure the true depths of this power. That uncertainty puts him on edge, knowing an unpredictable force like this could shatter the world's fragile balance. He decides to report this to the swordmaster, hoping this event is interesting enough to catch the old man's attention when he arrives. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls out from right beside him. Startled, he turns to find the old swordmaster is already standing there. This makes him sigh as he quietly mutters under his breath, complaining that the old man's creepy habit of sneaking up on people hasn't changed a bit. Swordmaster Kane chuckles, remarking that he needs his fun before getting straight to the point of his visit. Lord Balkan rises to greet him, stating it's an honor to be visited by Master Kane on such short notice. Meanwhile, the injured knight lies groaning in his recovery bed. Suddenly, the door swings open and Lord Balkan walks in for an unannounced visit, immediately asking about his subordinate's condition. The knight scrambles up, stammering that he'll recover soon while apologizing profusely for his loss. But then Kane steps in, telling the knight that his apology should be directed toward him instead, since this foolish student somehow managed to suffer a defeat against a mere random barbarian. The swordmaster decides to take a closer look at the boy's condition. He notices that although the armor is wrecked beyond repair, there isn't a single scratch on his actual body. He wouldn't have been shocked if the knight had died, yet the lack of injury proves the barbarian held back on purpose. Master Kane shares his analysis, explaining that their opponent wasn't just a brawny brute, but a warrior capable of terrifying precision. He notes that the man far surpasses the level of an ordinary knight, implying that he is operating on a superhuman level to show such mercy. This revelation sends both Lord Balkan and the defeated knight into stunned silence. Lord Balkan nervously clears his throat before speaking up, asking how the barbarian's strength compares to that of the swordmaster himself. Kane replies with absolute confidence that even if the barbarian is superhuman, he is no match for a true swordmaster. Lord Balkan breaks into a cold sweat as the master continues, noting that the barbarian fought without aura, a feat that should be impossible. Kane wonders if this raw power represents the true potential of the infamous Ashen barbarian. He begins recalling how he once laughed off the ancient tales as mere superstition. But now that a man has actually descended from the White Steps, he starts to suspect that those terrifying legends might actually hold some truth. He questions whether this entity is even human at all, or just another beast from that cursed land. However, he reminds himself that a true monster would never have shown mercy to a helpless human knight. Even with that logic, the mystery remains as to why someone from that frozen wasteland would appear at this specific moment. Lord Balkan watches the master sink into silence and grows uneasy, finally asking if everything is all right. The master brushes it off, stating that such concerns belong to another time, before making a quick comment about the situation. Complaining about how the emperor keeps making the most absurd demands, he advises the lord to set those worries aside for the moment. Then, he inquires if the barbarian is still within his territory, which the lord confirms. With a scoff, the master decides he needs to see this stranger for himself. Meanwhile, back at Lord Balkan's mansion, the captain asks about Katal's next move, but our protagonist isn't quite sure yet. Just moments ago, the captain had handed over the reward for the duel, and the lord personally granted him full autonomy to roam the domain without interference. Katal figures that while he lacks a plan, he definitely needs some form of identification so he doesn't have to clear a dungeon every time he crosses a border. The Night Guard captain explains there are two solutions: either secure a high-status sponsor or join the mercenaries. However, since most mercenaries are glorified errand boys, the captain suggests a legend like Katal would be far better off finding a noble sponsor. But the moment the word mercenary drops, our boy flushes with excitement. To him, mercenaries are the cool, monster-hunting adventurers from his wildest fantasies. Grinning ear to ear, he immediately asks the captain where he can sign up. Taken aback, the man awkwardly points him toward the local guild. Wearing the expression of a man who just fell in love, our boy politely asks the captain to lead the way. You see, while some view these wandering nomads as romantic figures, society generally regards mercenaries as bottom-tier scum. They're treated as cannon fodder for dirty work, often losing their lives just trying to scrape by. Later at the guild hall, tensions boil over as one mercenary slaps another in a fit of rage. The opponent matches his rage, daring the scumbag to make the first move. Meanwhile, the other mercenaries treat the brawl like a spectator sport, even placing bets on the outcome, while the two madmen tear into each other for absolutely no reason. Nearby, a pink-haired receptionist asks her colleague, Rosa, for her honest opinion on the new recruits. Looking like she'd rather die than finish her shift, the blonde replies that the current batch is nothing but a circus of weirdos. First is a delusional man playing paladin without powers. Next is a thief who looks like a Sekiro reject. And finally, a priestess who is normal but worships a god so sketchy that no one trusts her. The description leaves the pink-haired girl speechless, while Rosa sighs, lamenting her dead-end job babysitting these brain-dead monkeys. She silently prays for a handsome knight to sweep her away from this administrative hell. And just as the thought crosses her mind, the guild doors swing open with dramatic flair. Rosa instantly snaps out of her daydream, forcing herself back into professional customer service mode. Radiating an aura of undeniable dominance, our boy makes his grand entrance into the guild. Every brawler in the room freezes instantly, paralyzed by the terrifying presence of the Ashen barbarian. Even the veteran mercenaries are left gawking, their jaws practically hitting the floor. The sudden silence confuses Katal, making him wonder if he did something strange, but he ignores it. and calmly approaches the reception counter. The receptionist begins trembling in fear, terrified of offending him as she carefully asks about his motivation for joining. Catal explains that while he has many reasons, his top priority is fame, and he confirms he's ready to grind for the achievements needed to raise his rank. She asks for the registration fee and his personal details, but while he knows his name, the barbarian admits he has no idea how old he is. Not wanting to argue, she simply estimates a number to complete the paperwork. With the process done, she hands over a shiny new badge, warning him to guard it with his life as proof of his mercenary status. Staring down at the simple bronze badge in his hand, our boy's mood instantly lifts, and he immediately asks if there are any available quests. His eagerness to work catches her off guard, but she proceeds to lay out the limited selection of requests available to a new recruit. Catal stares blankly at the meager list of menial chores permitted for an F-rank mercenary. Rosa begins sweating bullets, terrified that the proud barbarian might take offense and lash out in anger. Hesitantly, she stammers that better jobs will open up once he builds a solid track record. To her surprise, however, he doesn't complain and makes a quick decision. He points directly to a simple herb-gathering request. Rosa blinks in confusion, asking if he's truly satisfied with such a humble task. Catal confirms his choice and asks for details on where to find the target vegetation. The receptionist produces an illustration of a red plant, explaining that they grow just outside the village. With a cheerful nod, our boy declares he's on the job and promptly heads for the exit, leaving her completely baffled by the sheer level of chill he's radiating. Once the door swings shut behind him, Rosa remains frozen in confusion while her colleague walks over, still trembling with fear. The scene shifts to the forest, located just outside the village, where Catal locates a clearing that is absolutely teeming with the medicinal herbs. Without wasting a second, he begins stripping off his clothes. Donning a straw hat to beat the heat, he sets to work, harvesting the herbs with professional efficiency. Barely an hour later, he returns to the guild and slams a massive sack onto the counter for Rosa to inspect. Flashing an innocent smile, he asks if the yield is sufficient, leaving Rosa to wonder if he decimated an entire ecosystem. However, her shock quickly turns to amazement when she notices the pristine condition of the plants. Most mercenaries rip them out like savages, ruining the quality, but his touch was incredibly delicate. Seeing her reaction, Catal proudly boasts about how skilled he is with his fingers, a comment that makes Rosa visibly uncomfortable. Ignoring the awkwardness, she hands over his reward, a single silver coin, barely enough to buy a stale piece of bread. Yet, for Catal, the sensation of earning money through honest sweat and hard labor fills him with an oddly wholesome sense of fulfillment. Energized, he leaps from his chair and immediately demands the next available assignment. Rosa is completely dumbfounded, unable to comprehend how a barbarian could be this thrilled over pocket change. To her surprise, he insists on cramming in as many tasks as possible before the sun goes down. The poor girl internally weeps, realizing this handsome recruit is just as much of a weirdo as the rest of them. True to his word, the barbarian hero blitzes through a series of quests, eventually signing up for his third cleaning job in a row. This odd pattern leads the receptionist to suspect that he might be some sort of obsessive clean freak. Despite her reservations, she confirms the quest for him. Thrilled by the prospect of more manual labor, he cheerfully marches off toward the warehouse. Upon arrival, he startles the owner, politely introducing himself as the cleaning crew she requested. The job is finished in record time, as moving heavy crates is hardly a workout for someone with his monstrous strength. Moving to the streets, he grabs a broom and sweeps with such vigor that he creates a dust storm, though he quickly learns to dial back his power. Meanwhile, Master Kane observes from a distance, peering through his binoculars while clad in a hilariously suspicious second-hand disguise. He squints, trying to understand the barbarian's game plan. Surely a man with empire-toppling strength shouldn't waste time on menial chores when he could live like a king. Yet the longer he watches, the more he realizes that the barbarian isn't just killing time, but actually seems to enjoy the labor, putting in genuine effort. Which leaves the master baffled as to why this warrior behaves more like a gentle giant than a ruthless beast. Later that day, after wrapping up a marathon of odd jobs, our boy arrives at the guild, where the receptionist hands him a coin pouch for clearing 15 different quests in a single day. He accepts the 15 silver coins with a beaming smile, promising to return the very next day. As he strolls through the town, small children burst into tears at the mere sight of him, and adults stare with the judgment intense enough to melt stone. But he simply minds his own business, and cheerfully makes his way toward the local library. As he steps inside the building, the librarian greets him with a hesitant smile, only to freeze when his massive frame looms over her. He politely asks to read a few books, and once she agrees, he grabs a small stack and quietly begins flipping through the pages, leaving the librarian to peek over at him in utter shock. Watching from the shadows, the swordmaster is stunned to see an uneducated barbarian reading with such intensity. wondering if the Snowfield tribes possess a culture the world knows nothing about. Or perhaps this young warrior is simply a miraculous anomaly. Having devoured a dense volume on history, Catal finally snaps the book shut. He reflects on the war where the Empire crushed the kingdom. Even though Milena had armed the kingdom with weapons from the snowfields, the Empire's might still prevailed. Now that once proud nation has been reduced to a mere vassal state under imperial rule. Following that victory, the Empire's influence spread like a plague, swallowing nearly half of the human world. And its expansion shows no signs of stopping, as if it intends to consume the entire planet. Done with the tales of empires and their thirst for domination, Catal decides to switch gears. He shifts his attention away from the tedious politics of humanity. Instead, he turns his curiosity toward the non-human inhabitants of this realm. Picking up a fresh text, he dives into the lore of the fantastical beings sharing this wild new world. He reads of Mantamia, a colossal dwarven cavern overflowing with rare, glittering ores. Then there is Pisarapia, a fairy village described as a dreamscape made real. Further on, he learns of Lagomaria, the floating sky cities inhabited by celestial beings. And finally, Elfo Sagrado, a hidden elven sanctuary so elusive that history's greatest rulers failed to uncover its location. Catal chuckles to himself, convinced that if anyone can breach that sanctuary, it would be him. However, just as his confidence peaks, the mood shifts. He stumbles upon a topic that catches him completely off guard. Apparently, there are 5 demon zones, massive, unhinged territories just as extreme as his home Snowfield, where humans are forbidden and the monsters defy all logic. One such place is the Silent Forest, a terrifying void where everything is swallowed by absolute stillness. There is the Abyss, a void that drags everything down into pure evil. The Deep Sea, inhabited by strange aquatic primates that breathe just like humans. The Hollow Pit, a barren wasteland where the sheer emptiness is enough to drive one mad. And finally, the Snowfield, the very place our boy calls home. These regions are teeming with terrifying monsters known as aberrations, though the texts claim they cannot breach the human world. This revelation makes Catal pause, struck by the sheer scale of the world. Remembering the vastness of the Snowfield, he finds it hard to believe there are other regions of equal magnitude. After absorbing this wealth of new information, he stands up, feeling a renewed sense of gratitude, and politely thanks the librarian, who simply nods, shyly accepting his appreciation without saying a word. Our hero then makes his way back to the guild, approaching the receptionist Rosa with his usual casual demeanor, to ask about new quests. As she hands over a stack of fresh forms for him to review, a different scene unfolds far from the guild. Master Kane finishes his observation, concluding that the time has finally come to confront the mysterious Ashen Barbarian directly. Later that night, amidst the lights of the bustling city, Catal strolls home, feeling satisfied after knocking out over a dozen small requests in a single day. He is pleasantly surprised to see how those meager rewards have stacked up to a respectable sum. Walking alone under the dim moonlight, he muses that at this pace, global fame as a mercenary is practically within reach. However, he remains blissfully unaware that a certain hooded, mustached man is lying in wait just around the corner. Suddenly, the hooded elder steps directly into his path and locks eyes with him, fixing him with a piercing stare, while the swordmaster stands there, attempting to maintain an air of mysterious cool. Our hero casually reveals he's been aware of the tale all day, leaving Master Kane visibly rattled. He coldly demands to know what business the stranger has with him. Kane is stunned into silence, convinced that no ordinary warrior could have pierced the perfect stealth he's honed for years. He receives another shock when the barbarian reaches for his weapon, wondering aloud if the silent old man is actually a bandit. He muses that it's actually impressive for a criminal to slip past the city's tight border security undetected. Master Kane desperately wants to reveal his true identity as the renowned swordmaster right then and there, but his wounded pride seals his lips, and Catal continues the roast, pitying an economy that forces a shriveled old man into petty crime. However, his feigned pity quickly transforms into a smug, predatory grin, as he figures capturing such a skilled infiltrator will be an easy way to boost his standing at the mercenary guild. Although the swordmaster isn't exactly thrilled about being mistaken for a common thug, he realizes this is the perfect opportunity to see if the barbarian can actually handle a serious threat. It allows him to test the warrior's true potential without the need to hold back. But as the barbarian begins to close the distance, the old master can hardly believe what he is seeing. His opponent completely vanishes into thin air, leaving absolutely no trace behind. Before his brain can even register the movement, Catal reappears instantaneously, hovering mere inches from his face, and his massive hand shoots toward the old man at lightning speed. At the very last moment, however, the swordmaster twists his body out of harm's way. Even Catal is impressed by the fluidity of the dodge, considering the man has one foot in the grave. Master Kane, on the other hand, nearly has a heart attack. He realizes that a millisecond of hesitation would have meant death, but the real shock is that he didn't sense a drop of aura from Catal. Meanwhile, the barbarian flashes a genuine smile, clearly appreciating the old man's reflexes. Kane wonders if that strike was powered solely by raw physical strength, but he doesn't have time to think. He adopts a serious expression, deciding to go all in with his counterattack. However, his momentum is halted instantly when his opponent suddenly vanishes and reappears behind him, gripping his shoulder hard enough to nearly dislocate the joint. The swordmaster is stunned, realizing his heightened senses failed to pick up even a trace of the movement. Before he can react, Catal traps him in a tight arm lock. Master Kane struggles with everything he has, but initially fails to break the hold. He realizes this battle has devolved into a contest of sheer physical might. The swordmaster flares his energy, pushing back against the restraint with full force. As soon as Catal feels that sudden surge of power, our boy is genuinely impressed by the resistance. Using that burst of energy, Master Kane finally manages to break free. The old man looks proud for a split second, feeling as though he's proven his worth. But Catal ruins the mood, remarking that bandits these days know some surprisingly advanced techniques. He notes the mana flowing through the old man's body, a feat reserved for elites, finding it strange that such a powerhouse would pose as a lowly bandit. Meanwhile, Master Kane can't comprehend what this oblivious fool is actually made of. The mana manifesting around his body should shred a normal human to pieces upon the slightest contact. Yet this barbarian stands there completely unscathed. Catal tells the old man he doesn't understand the fancy technique, but declares that playtime is officially over. Sensing the threat, the swordmaster instinctively grabs his hilt, but before he can even draw the blade, the ashen barbarian calmly slides the weapon right back into its scabbard. This level of humiliation is unbearable for a man of Kane's legendary stature. He strains with all his might to force the sword out, but he is no match for Catal's overwhelming grip. Then, watching that massive hand inch slowly closer to his face, the swordmaster finally accepts the grim reality that his time is up. With that, the barbarian hoists him over his shoulder, scoffing at what passes for a bandit in this fantasy world. Over at the guard tower, the captain watches on in absolute horror. He sees the ashen barbarian casually dragging Master Kane along like a domesticated pet. He initially assumes Catal attacked the swordmaster, but when our boy cheerfully reports capturing a criminal, the captain's jaw nearly crashes through the floor in disbelief. Wearing a radiant smile, Catal asks if his mercenary rank will increase now that he's caught such a villain. After struggling to compose himself, the captain wonders how a legend who transcended human limits was dragged in here like a beaten stray dog. Taking a deep breath, the captain firmly explains that the man he captured is definitely not a bandit. So naturally, our big-brain barbarian concludes that the guard must be the bandit's accomplice. The guard bows, revealing that this old man is actually the Gehentra Kingdom's esteemed swordmaster. Yet Catal remains entirely unconvinced by this absurd claim. Deadpan, he insists the senile bandit only attacked him to snatch his silver coins. The guard is adamant he wouldn't mistake the swordmaster, even when Catal suggests the old man used illusion magic. The captain counters that a mage of that caliber would be famous too, leaving Catal wondering if they hand out titles to just anyone. Exhausted by the barbarian's oblivious nonsense, the guard cuts to the chase. The knight captain reconfirms the old man's identity one final time. He then declares that he must report this entire incident to his lord immediately. Back at the mansion, Lord Barkin is flabbergasted to learn that Master Kane was thrashed by a random barbarian. Hours later, Catal is summoned to the estate, where he politely offers an apology to Master Kane. The old master reciprocates, apologizing for the unfortunate misunderstanding. A heavy, awkward silence hangs in the air between the two warriors. Meanwhile, Lord Barkin and the knight captain are stunned, realizing the swordmaster has suffered his first ever defeat. This implies the ashen barbarian is stronger than one of the kingdom's most elite fighters, even if Master Kane is considered a lower-tier expert who only recently reached superhuman status. The fact that Catal effortlessly crushed him proves he is a walking monster. The mere thought gives Lord Barkin a headache, so he excuses himself, telling the men to settle their differences alone. Once the room clears out, Master Kane and our boy quietly stare each other down. The old man simply cannot admit that he was surgically dismantled and had his pride shattered to pieces. Eventually, he gathers his composure and formally introduces himself as Swordmaster Kane. Catal pauses, asking if Swordmaster is actually part of his name, but Kane explains it is a noble title rather than a birthright. Curious, the boy asks if the impressive technique he witnessed earlier was a specific Swordmaster ability. In response, Lord Kane manifests a swirling aura of arcane energy around his hand. Catal leaps from his chair in pure excitement. He had previously dismissed the light as a cheap bandit trick, but now, realizing it represents the pinnacle of swordsmanship, he is completely captivated by the display. Cain explains that he is looking at aura, the physical manifestation of raw arcane energy, recalling how imposing the glowing energy made the old master look during their clash. Catal's eyes light up, and he immediately demands to know how he can wield it himself. Simplifying the concept, Lord Cain states that aura is the projection of arcane power. When Catal inquires if the substance is similar to mana, the nobleman explains that arcane energy is the root source. It becomes aura for swordsmen and mana for mages. This mysterious power piques Catal's interest, and he eagerly begs for lessons, despite the embarrassment of admitting his total lack of background. Noticing the barbarian's genuine intensity and desire to learn, Lord Cain questions why someone who is already physically stronger than a swordmaster would even need these techniques. Catal admits that he lacks refined skill, currently relying on nothing but brute force and wild swings to survive. This confession soothes the swordmaster's ego, suggesting he only lost because he never had the chance to draw the weapon he mastered. Eager to salvage his dignity and reputation, Lord Cain decides to reclaim his honor by educating the barbarian. He agrees to the training, declaring that a warrior is only half a man without his sword. Catal nods, bluntly agreeing that Cain was pathetic because he couldn't use his weapon, leaving the old man stunned by his brutal honesty. Our boy remarks that the kingdom's standards for swordmasters must be slipping, a comment that only fuels Cain's rage. However, he softens the blow by admitting that Cain likely would have won if he had actually drawn his blade. Hearing that acknowledgement restores just a sliver of the old man's shattered dignity. Back in the human world, Catal took swordsmanship seriously, but he realizes his prior training is useless here, where combat relies on manipulating arcane energy. The training begins immediately, with Lord Cain explaining that the core of his style lies in the delicate balance between reality and illusion. He asks what Catal saw during his fight with the disciple, and our hero recalls how the student's blade seemed to split into 3 simultaneous tangible strikes. Reflecting on that battle, Catal begins to grasp the true concept of this world's sword arts. He asks the old master if their swordsmanship relies purely on technique, rather than raw physical strength. In response, the old geezer finally draws his weapon. The steel instantly begins to glow with a faint, ominous green aura. It's a display of power that immediately captures Catal's full attention. Still grumbling about teaching such a refined art to a mere barbarian, Cain prepares to demonstrate. He drives his blade swiftly into the ground. The earth cracks open as the single strike divides neatly into 5 precise, devastating attacks. Cain launches into a complex explanation about how these various techniques coexist and evolve. But Catal isn't interested in the boring theory. Instead, he boldly claims that he can simply copy the skill right now. The old swordsman scoffs at the arrogance, calling it utter nonsense. He refuses to believe a novice could mimic a technique he spent his entire life mastering. Ignoring the doubt, Catal steps up and takes a swing. He executes the move without a second thought. To everyone's shock, the attack actually splits into 5 distinct strikes. The old master freezes in place, unable to process the impossible sight he just witnessed. When Catal asks if his replication was accurate, the master admits that while it looked convincing, the barbarian merely used raw speed to mimic the effect. Although momentarily deceived, he regains his composure and insists there was no real technique behind the blow. Catal calmly counters that since swordsmanship is for combat, the end result matters more than the method. The old man grows uneasy, shedding a few tears as he realizes the barbarian's logic might actually be sound. Refusing to be humiliated, Lord Cain decides to escalate the challenge to prove his superiority. He performs an advanced maneuver where his entire body appears to split apart. He proudly declares this technique is bodily separation, a feat requiring absolute mastery of aura. Turning to Catal, he issues a direct challenge, asking if he can copy this complex move as well. Without a moment's hesitation, the barbarian steps forward to answer the call. Utilizing godlike velocity, he replicates the illusion, making it appear as if his body has truly split. The sheer force of his movement tears the roof off the building and even stirs up a violent whirlwind in the process. Standing tall, the ashen barbarian confidently asks if he achieved the correct form. The old man, unable to maintain his composure, drops to his knees with tears in his eyes. He simply cannot accept that a brute like Catal could instantly mimic the techniques he spent an entire lifetime refining. Catal turns to him, teasing that for someone with such a stern face, he really wears his heart on his sleeve. Trying to lighten the mood, Catal assures him that his swordsmanship is actually quite impressive. He even downplays his own victory, claiming he was just swinging his axe with brute force and no real skill. That little bit of praise is all it takes to instantly lift the old master's spirits. In fact, he immediately spirals into a state of smug self-satisfaction. He proudly convinces himself that he is the only one in the world capable of mastering both illusion and reality. Clenching his fist, he whispers a reassurance to himself that his technique is absolutely flawless. He decides the real problem is that this barbarian is just a maniac. But then Catal respectfully asks if the old man would teach him the secrets of his arts. The old geezer, still recovering from his emotional roller coaster, takes a deep breath. He apologizes for his unsightly outburst, and his demeanor quickly shifts to one of serious focus. He explains that the first step is learning to control aura, which requires a true comprehension of the arcane. Lord Cain adds that reaching the higher realms is impossible without awakening this power, unless one is among the rare few blessed by the divine. Curious, Catal asks if this divine power is something entirely different from the arcane. Master Cain clarifies that a divine gift is bestowed by the gods, having no connection to an individual's talent or effort. He presses on with his explanation without pausing. He describes the arcane as a dormant force within everyone, the fundamental origin from which all other abilities spring. He then begins to outline the 5 distinct stages of arcane mastery. The very first stage is simply acquiring the ability to sense its presence. Catal wonders aloud if just anyone is capable of achieving that first step. But the old man shakes his head, explaining that only those who can feel it are worthy of being ranked in the 3rd class. As Master Cain elaborates on the 5 distinct stages, Catal recalls a specific detail Milena once mentioned, and suddenly the concept begins to click into place. The old man notes that this structure is merely a guideline, as the boundaries between classes are rarely so distinct. Moving past the theory, they officially begin the first stage, arcane perception. Master Cain instructs him to close his eyes and reach out to feel his surroundings, explaining that awakening this perception requires pushing every single sense to its absolute limit. He likens the sensation to feeling the wind against one's skin, followed by detecting an underlying secondary presence in the air. However, after only a few seconds pass, Catal bluntly admits that he senses absolutely nothing. Mildly shocked, Master Cain didn't expect him to hit a wall so quickly, admitting he assumed a warrior of Catal's caliber would have some natural aptitude for it. While untrained warriors typically develop this sense gradually, this barbarian proves to be a bizarre anomaly. Cain theorizes that this spiritual blockage might be a side effect of the White Wasteland. Catal confirms this, recalling that none of his fellow barbarians had any concept of arcane energy. Accepting this, Cain decides to skip the subtle approach and unlock Catal's path through brute force. Although Catal barely comprehends a word of the old man's explanation, he lights up with excitement the moment he realizes Master Cain is about to transfer raw aura to him. Showing the true soul of an aura farmer, Catal eagerly declares he's ready for whatever comes next. He sits down with high expectations, while the swordmaster tells him to let go of all tension and focus completely on what is happening inside his body. After that, Master Cain places a steady hand on his back and begins channeling aura, but he freezes for a second. He senses what is actually going on inside this guy. He starts questioning whether the Ashen Barbarian is even human, because his insides feel more solid than the rock, and his muscle density is so absurd it might as well be a black hole. Still confused why nothing is happening, Catal turns his head around and asks what the holdup is, and the old man admits that he was lost in thought. However, Master Cain quickly realizes that he simply cannot reach Catal's arcane core. No matter how far he pushes his aura, it feels like he is being pulled deeper and deeper into some never-ending abyss that keeps crushing him with its raw pressure. Eventually, he admits that this method will not work at all. Hearing that, Catal's disappointment is immeasurable and his day is ruined. He stares in confusion and frustration, asking if it is just not possible because he has zero talent for magic. But Master Cain firmly clarifies that simply channeling aura into him is not enough to draw out the arcane from someone, so the only remaining option is for people like him to awaken it on their own. The problem is, though, that he could not even find a trace of arcane anywhere in the cattle's entire body. Baffled, our boy asks if that means he just does not have the power in him at all. And Master Cain explains that he simply could not confirm anything because Catal's body is far from normal. The swordmaster explains that his aura needs to pass through the body smoothly, but Catal's build is so absurdly solid that his aura cannot travel far enough inside. After realizing that even a top-tier swordmaster like this guy cannot help him, he pouts like a kid and mutters that this means he will never get to use that cool, mysterious power. In response, Master Cain tells him that he cannot say for sure whether there is a path or not. He suggests that Catal finds a swordmaster with a more potent aura, or perhaps tries his luck at the mage tower instead. Cain sincerely apologizes for his inability to provide further assistance. Catal casually brushes it off, assuring him that everything is fine since a sliver of hope remains. Afterward, he thanks the veteran swordsman for everything he has taught him. Master Cain stands there, completely stunned by the display of manners. Up until now, every barbarian he'd met was just a violent, mindless beast unfit for civilized society. Realizing Catal is an exception, Master Cain asks if he would consider joining the kingdom. This would involve pledging his absolute loyalty to the king in exchange for noble status. Cain insists he would quickly rise through the ranks due to his immense power, and even offers to sponsor him personally. However, our hero declines the tempting offer, preferring a life on the road over settling down, much to the swordmaster's disappointment. Catal's raw power would be a massive asset to the Empire, so Master Cain presses the issue one more time. He asks if Catal truly has no interest in this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to become nobility. But the barbarian makes it clear that he is a free spirit who bows to no man. Upon hearing this declaration, the swordmaster is left completely speechless. Catal thanks him one last time before heading out, grateful for the mentorship he received. Later, as the old man walks alone through the empty halls, he reflects on how foolish it was to believe that someone like Catal could ever be controlled. The fact that he acts entirely on his own free will makes him even more dangerous than the mindless demons from the snowfields. He lets out a heavy sigh of deep frustration. Master Cain can't help but question the Emperor's sanity for attempting to conquer the perilous demon realm. Back in Lord Barkin's quarters, the noble asks if Cain is certain about the Emperor's intent to seize the demon lands. The swordmaster confirms it, noting that the Emperor is sending men to their deaths under the guise of gathering intel. Such recklessness fuels suspicions that he might be the reincarnation of a former mad emperor. Since the Empire hasn't even unified the human realm, Cain warns that their own summons to the front lines may be imminent. He also alerts the Lord to unconfirmed but escalating reports that dungeon outbreaks are intensifying, a phenomenon likely caused by the blight bleeding in from the demon realm. Regardless of the cause, it is the common people who will suffer the most. Finally, Cain raises one last concern. The massive anomaly that escaped the wasteland is now roaming free. Laying the facts bare, he asks for the Lord's assessment of the situation. While Barkin doesn't view Catal as an enemy, he admits that only time will reveal the Ashen Barbarian's true path, especially after the brute gave the swordmaster a humiliating existential crisis. As a new day dawns, Catal returns to exploring the Barkin territory like a carefree tourist. However, he notices that wherever he goes, children burst into tears and cling to their mothers. Even grown men do their absolute best to give him a wide berth. He wonders if this reaction is due to his primitive attire, rather than his monstrous NBA-ready physique. After all, a raw beast-hide vest doesn't exactly scream civilized to the locals. So his mission for the day is to finally acquire some proper clothing. Naturally, the first shop he visits is a high-end boutique. Inside, he found racks of colorful fabrics and garments neatly displayed. However, when the manager saw the hulking beast that had just walked in, he nearly fainted from sheer terror. After all, how would you react to a towering barbarian demanding fresh drip? On the verge of tears, the manager apologized, explaining they had nothing in giant sizes. But if he was willing to wait, they could certainly tailor a custom order to his dimensions. This cheered Catal up immediately, and he excitedly placed his request. The manager took his details, promising to notify him the moment the outfit was ready. The poor tailor feared that if the final product didn't meet the barbarian's standards, both his business and his life would be swiftly extinguished. After getting measured and finalizing the order, Catal headed back toward the guild hall. Along the way, he stumbled across a curious blue gem lying on the roadside. Intrigued by the discovery, he stopped to pick it up. Inspecting it closely, he found himself mesmerized by its captivating luster. Catal innocently pocketed the shiny stone, deciding to ask the guild staff about it. As usual, he went straight to Rosa, the receptionist, for answers. The barbarian handed her the object and asked if she had any information. Rosa examined it briefly and concluded that it wasn't actually a gemstone. The surface was far too smooth to be something naturally occurring. It appeared to be man-made, but without markings, its purpose remained a mystery. As the receptionist stares deep into the azure sphere, the object's brilliance begins to lull her into a trance. Noticing this, Catal snaps his fingers to break Rosa out of her daze. The sudden noise jolts her back to reality, prompting him to ask if she's feeling all right. He had to intervene, seeing as she was becoming dangerously captivated by the item. She hadn't even noticed the pull, but now Rosa senses the strange energy radiating from it, suggesting they get it appraised professionally. However, Catal decides he'd prefer to investigate the mystery himself. Treating it like a side quest, he shifts gears and asks Rosa for the daily job list before heading out. As usual, it's a collection of menial chores, pulling weeds, digging potatoes, and cleaning sewers. While other mercenaries might scoff at such grunt work, Catal is more than happy to tackle these novice tasks. He blitzes through the entire list in record time, collects his hard-earned rewards, and heads back to his room to wrap up another fulfilling day. Once alone, he retrieves the mysterious orb to examine it more closely. He recalls how Rosa nearly lost her mind to a hypnotic daze just by looking at it. Suddenly, a disembodied voice calls out to him from within the artifact. His consciousness is pulled inward as the voice attempts to guide him somewhere. It projects a map into his mind, likely using some form of domination magic to compel him. But with nothing better to do that night, Catal decides to simply play along with the entity. Donning his beast-hide vest, he followed the instructions, though the nagging voice was becoming a nuisance. He waded through tangles of wild vines and traversed the city's desolate outskirts, until finally he stumbled upon the mouth of a concealed cavern. With an amused smirk, he stepped boldly into the dark maw, unfazed by whatever entity awaited him within. Unbeknownst to Catal, eyes were already upon him the moment he set foot in the dingy cave. The observer saw him merely as fresh fuel, a massive, dim-witted barbarian perfect for an offering. Deep inside, a skeletal monstrosity trembled with glee, eager to claim this 10th victim to complete his resurrection. Ages ago, during an era of endless war, this evil mage had engineered the ruin of kingdoms by manipulating human emotion and controlling the minds of countless monarchs, ruling from the shadows as their puppet master. But eventually, his atrocities drew the ire of heroes who hunted him down. Before the final blow, however, he transferred his soul into a vessel, becoming a Lich. He became an eternal, undying spirit, irrevocably bound to his phylactery. Since then, the former tyrant has been lurking in the dark, patiently plotting his return to dominance. Requiring souls to fuel his revival, he settled in this remote territory, scattering bewitching orbs to lure unwitting victims to their doom. These innocent lives fueled the mana core required for his rebirth, granting him power far greater than before to conquer the world anew. After countless years of waiting, his ultimate goal was finally within reach. Yet, he found himself puzzled as to why a barbarian would wander into such a desolate region. Northerners rarely left their frozen nests, but considering the brute's massive size, he would certainly make for a bountiful offering. The orb was enchanted to ensnare those without magic resistance, ensuring only ignorant, non-magical mortals would fall for the trap. Thus, the Lich was certain this barbarian was nothing more than a simple brute, completely void of arcane sense. He allowed the warrior to follow the voice deeper, eager to claim the final piece for his glorious resurrection. Meanwhile, Catal casually strolled through the dank corridors until he arrived at a wooden gate. The moment he pushed open the ancient door, he discovered a grotesque skeleton mage channeling a dark aura. Recognizing the creature as a genuine Lich, Catal nearly burst with excitement, for he knew that these beings were once mages who achieved the pinnacle of sorcery, representing the ultimate fantasy villains. While the barbarian geeked out, completely devoid of fear or apprehension, the Lich began to feel genuinely unsettled. Catal finally had a culprit responsible for the orb's powerful luring effect. Confused, the Lich couldn't sense any mana from this musclehead, concluding he must possess a high-tier artifact shielding his mind. He commended the barbarian's luck in finding such a treasure, though Catal had absolutely no clue what the monster was rambling about. The Lich waved his scepter to reanimate the scattered bones around the crypt, infusing them with dark mana. He threatened to crush Catal by force, commanding his minions to swarm the living sacrifice. However, Catal was simply thrilled to experience a classic dungeon showdown with an evil boss. As soon as the first skeleton entered his striking range, he backhanded the pile of bones straight into the dirt. The blow was so forceful that it sent shivers down the summoner's spine, watching as the skull cracked and shattered upon impact. Catal considered the slap a bit flimsy, yet it yielded far better results than he had anticipated. Wounded by the insult, the Lich targeted Catal's limbs, deciding that a crippled sacrifice would serve the ceremony just as well. The next wave of skeletal warriors was an upgrade, brandishing rusted swords. Catal scoffed at the threat, unleashing a haymaker that instantly shattered the first attacker's jaw. Before the dust settled, he followed up with a strike that added another crushed skull to his tally. He dropped the third enemy with a brutal, bone-snapping roundhouse kick, and with casual ease, he sent the fourth crumbling back into the dirt. Watching his minions get dismantled one by one left the Lich completely slack-jawed in disbelief. Catal was already well-versed in handling these bony bastards from his first dungeon run. Crushing the head was always the most effective method. In fact, he was openly disappointed that the Lich hadn't summoned a Death Knight or something remotely challenging. Hearing this casual mockery dealt a critical blow to the Lich's fragile ego. The bag of bones stammered in rage, declaring that he was done playing nice. Raising his scepter high, he conjured a new, more distinct summon from the earth. This creature rose clad in full-plate armor, forged entirely from condensed mana. It was a skeleton knight, yet Catal remained thoroughly unimpressed. He'd obliterated one of these recently, but he tried to convince himself that a Lich-crafted version might offer a better fight. As soon as the kill order was issued, the battle resumed. The skeleton knight surged into action, closing the distance instantly. Catal simply clenched his fist, bracing himself for the collision. As the knight swung its blade mid-charge, Catal decided to run a quick durability test on the poor bastard. With a look of sheer boredom, he punched a hole straight through the skeleton knight's supposedly impenetrable armor. Just like his first encounter with this type of enemy, the battle was an absolute stomp. However, unlike the previous skeleton knight he had effortlessly dismantled, This one still possessed enough resilience to demand a round 2. Catal was pleasantly surprised by the creature's unexpected durability. The Lich frantically poured mana into the night, pushing his limits to sustain the summon. The bag of bones snarled at Catal, defying the fact that most of its joints had already turned to dust. Catal simply stood his ground, waiting to see what the crippled undead had left in its arsenal. He clenched his fist, and with impeccable precision, timed a straightforward, devastating punch directly to the face. Once again, the knight was sent flying across the room like a bony rag doll. It slammed into the cavern walls, its shattered bones mingling with the debris. The Lich could feel his grand dreams of resurrection slipping through his skeletal fingers. Unbothered, Catal stepped forward. The sound of loose bones crushing beneath his boots echoed through the hall. He turned to the summoner, asking the Lich if that was truly all he had. He was thoroughly underwhelmed by what was supposed to be this fantasy world's final boss. The Lich was baffled. He couldn't sense an iota of magic from the barbarian, and even a cloaking artifact would leak some mana. He was forced to admit that this man was simply built different. A monster destroying a skeleton knight with nothing but raw physical strength. In all his countless years of existence, he had never witnessed anything quite so absurd. Deeming Catal a worthy opponent, the Lich prepares to face the barbarian personally, urging him to consider it an honor to witness his wrath firsthand. As the surroundings plunge into darkness, Catal isn't unnerved, but rather intrigued, gazing into an endless void stretching out in all directions. This zone of terror is the price Catal must pay for his blatant disrespect and for daring to trespass upon the sanctuary. The Lich speaks boldly, conveniently forgetting that he was the one luring innocent victims here using the orb as bait. Even the Lich seems to realize the hypocrisy of his own threats. After all, everyone standing before him was a victim of his scattered orbs, and Catal is no exception. The prideful undead flaunts his titles, declaring himself Kartos Branuelos Kessis, the mastermind who toppled 5 kingdoms and battled ancient heroes. This reminds Catal of the elf queen he met recently. While the Lich monologues, the barbarian is just annoyed by people with such unnecessarily long names. Meanwhile, the Lich begins weaving a spell intended to turn Catal into a cornerstone for his resurrection ritual. Dark energy erupts from the scepter, shooting straight toward the barbarian and clouding his vision. The world spins around him as his gaze becomes locked onto the swirling vortex of dark power. This particular magic is designed to manipulate and control human emotions. By drawing out negative memories, it traps the victim in a cycle of despair, rendering them paralyzed and mentally broken. It is a unique spell developed by Kartos himself, a low-cost ability that makes him nearly invincible in single combat. He is certain a mere barbarian with no arcane knowledge will crumble instantly, and Kartos begins planning his next move, assuming the brute is already compromised. Perhaps he can capture this anomaly and study him for a moment before the sacrificial ceremony begins. Kartos commands his skeletal minions to move in and retrieve the presumably dazed barbarian. But the moment the lanky bag of bones tries to get close, Catal launches the fool into the stratosphere, sending the poor skeleton smashing into the cavern ceiling. Its skull is instantly crushed and pulverized upon impact. All signs of haze were gone from the barbarian's eyes, and the Lich was on the verge of crashing the fuck out. Every summons he tried ended up being bone meal for the cave's barren ground. He was sure that the mind control spell worked perfectly. Catal was utterly unimpressed by all the tricks. The skeleton summoning is becoming a little repetitive. He sighed with boredom. His dream of having an epic battle turned out to be remarkably anticlimactic. With every word out of his mouth, the Lich's pride gets increasingly tattered. Kratos was under the impression that humans are creatures ruled by emotions. No matter how powerful they become, they all carry some form of heavy negativity buried deep in their hearts. That's why he sees his emotion control magic as an immutable and irresistible weapon. While Kratos was questioning the branch of magic he had dedicated centuries to perfecting, Catal was requesting some fireballs or magic missiles, something flashy. If there's one thing he loathes, it is his magic being compared to low-tier spells. Fueled by hate for the unsuspecting barbarian, Kartos summoned a dark, murky current with neither form nor substance. This ultimate technique shall swallow the world and drown all clarity and chaos. That incredibly grandiose chant revived Catal's hope of seeing something truly mythical. When the murky wave of darkness reached its zenith form, it was unleashed to consume everything in its path. Catal stood like a curious kid as he watched the waves barrel towards his position. With his ultimate technique in full effect, the Lich laughed maniacally, expecting an inevitable victory. His early celebration was cut short when a black bile shot out of his mouth. He fell to his knees, severely weakened. Kartos severely overdid it with that last spell. He spent all his mana, except the bare minimum, to keep his vessel together. Still, it is worth it just to see that barbarian die a horrible death. Unfortunately for him, he had completely depleted his mana reserves in vain. Catal remained standing, offering mild praise for the technique. He was slightly impressed, but he expected far more. Even the most devastating spell in the Lich's arsenal proved utterly useless against the strange barbarian. Had a legendary hero taken that hit directly, their mind would have shattered into a million fragments. Yet for Katal, it felt like nothing more than a slight tickle. Seeing the Lich collapsing to his knees in exhaustion, Katal casually drew his massive battle axe. He had taken every dark trick head-on, so it was only fair that he finally took his turn. That was when the Lich began deluding himself, desperate to find a logical reason for his failure. Kardos became convinced that the barbarian had sought out this cave fully aware of his identity. As usual, Katal had absolutely no clue what the hell the bonehead was rambling about. The Lich laughed maniacally, praising a non-existent intelligence network for successfully tracking him down. He vowed to rise again, shatter any blade sent against him, and rule the world as he once had. He recalled a rumor that deep within the Empire lay a secret facility for breeding humans, a place where elite talents are cultivated. He concluded this man was a living weapon, bred and trained solely to kill the immortal Lich, an assassin honed to perfection by the Empire's full resources. Even so, Kardos Brunulis Kessis would prevail, snap the blade meant to end him, and overthrow the Empire once more. Hearing this nonsensical babble, Katal worried that the underwhelming Lich had completely lost his marbles. When all other options failed, the soul of the ancient mage abandoned his physical vessel and attempted to force his way directly into Katal's body. He initiated the transfer, believing that invading the barbarian's body and consuming his simple mind would provide a fresh, powerful vessel. It was his only path to survival, and the potential benefits were staggering. As his soul successfully infiltrated that indestructible physique, Kartos prepared to lay claim to his new home. However, upon reaching the barbarian's inner mind palace, he instantly sensed that something was dreadfully wrong. He had never witnessed anything quite like this before. The Lich expected to find memories of a soldier molded by the Empire, but when faced with the true nature of Katal's existence, Kartos realized that the Empire couldn't possibly comprehend a being of this magnitude. His consciousness collapsed instantly, and the mighty Lich Kartos died in a state of utter confusion. Back in the physical world, Katal had no idea what had just transpired. All he saw was the Lich suddenly drop dead before the fight could even truly begin. He had been observing passively the entire time, genuinely curious to witness the magic of a fully evolved mage. Instead, he concluded that leashes were underwhelming, but at least the dungeon was cleared and rewards awaited. Katal casually scooped up the scepter Kartos had left behind, wondering if he could use it to practice some magic of his own. But as he fidgeted with the artifact, the magical crystal core suddenly popped loose. Treating the power source as simple loot, he shoved the gem into his pocket. Next, he examined the vase which had served as the vessel for Kratos' soul. He secured that as well, making a mental note to have Rosa appraise it later. With both the scepter and the vessel in hand, he was thoroughly pleased with his rewards. Just before leaving, a sinister magic circle inscribed on the wall caught his eye. Suspecting a secret chamber might lie behind the ominous marking, he decided to investigate the surface. Or rather, he simply obliterated the sturdy wall with a light touch. However, what lay beyond the rubble was a truly macabre sight. He had uncovered the Lich's hidden sacrificial chamber, filled with unfortunate victims suspended in a death-like slumber. Katal had hoped for extra loot, not a grim collection of mortal souls awaiting sacrifice. Still, driven by curiosity about their identities, he approached to check their condition. He even tried calling out to them, but they remained completely unresponsive. Unsure of how to handle this grim discovery on his own, he decided to return to the guild and report the situation to the authorities. Surely they would dispatch a team to manage the rescue operation. By the time he stepped back through the guild's entrance, the sun had fully risen, casting a new light on his journey. And this time Rosa welcomed him with respect and enthusiasm, replacing her usual skepticism. He mentioned that he had some unfinished business to attend to, a statement that immediately piqued her curiosity. Katal revealed that he had just solved the mystery of the orb he'd shown her the previous day. He gave her a full report on the hidden dungeon, though her initial reaction was pure disbelief. She knew of only 5 existing leeches, and their backwater territory seemed like an impossible hiding spot for one. To prove his story, Katal produced the vase that had served as Kardos' life vessel. It radiated a menacing aura, yet this lunatic expected a simple receptionist to appraise such a cursed object. Rosa was left completely speechless, unsure of how to handle such an absurd request. It finally dawned on her that the wild tale this barbarian was casually recounting was actually true. He also mentioned finding captives held for a sacrificial ritual, causing Rosa to fear this man might send her to an early grave. He considered rescuing them, but since their minds were shattered, he decided a professional evaluation was required first. Come to think of it, there had been a suspicious spike in disappearances throughout the territory recently. If a Lich was truly responsible, This situation was vastly above a mere receptionist's pay grade. She realized she needed to alert the authorities immediately. The guard captain barged into the guild hall the moment he received word about the Lich. Inside, he found the barbarian sitting at a table, his massive frame making the furniture look like a child's toy. Catal calmly assured the anxious officer that the threat was neutralized, so there was no need for panic. However, when he dropped the name Cardos during his debriefing, the mood shifted instantly. The captain was flabbergasted. Everyone knew that name, from high-ranking officials to random peasants on the street. Cardos was pure evil incarnate, a sorcerer who once upended the world by creating emotion manipulation magic. This was a monster who drove 5 kings to madness and ruined 5 kingdoms. The mere mention of a lich would usually terrify anyone. Yet Catal nonchalantly insisted that the undead sorcerer wasn't actually that impressive. Since Cardos had self-destructed, the first captain pressed for a more detailed explanation, knowing the gravity of the news. Although Catal wanted to be helpful, there wasn't much to say since the battle had ended in the blink of an eye. The captain asked the barbarian to wait briefly while he rushed to inform Lord Varkin of the situation. When the territory's overseer heard that an agent of death had been lurking nearby, he initially refused to believe it. He desperately tried to convince himself that it must have been some other, lesser type of monster. However, the rescued victims had already given their testimonies, and they were absolutely positive their captor was a lich. Furthermore, there was undeniable physical proof in the form of the recovered life vessel. With this evidence, it is only a matter of time before the Empire dispatches investigators to scrutinize the incident. The timing could not be worse, especially with Lord Kane currently away from the estate. Still, it is Varkin's duty to report this to the capital, though they could count themselves fortunate in one regard. If the barbarian hadn't stumbled upon that lair, the outcome would have been catastrophic. It was highly likely that Cardos had been in the final stages of preparing his own resurrection. Once again, Catal had pulled off a remarkable feat that saved countless lives, and naturally such a triumph required a reward of equal magnitude. The problem was that Lord Varkin had no idea what he could possibly offer the eccentric man that would suffice. The following day, the Lord awoke and began his routine, donning his robes as the morning sun rose over the estate. Suddenly, a maid frantically burst into the room to announce the arrival of the sun god's Inquisitor, Lord Aquas. Varkin quickly changed into formal attire before rushing out to meet his esteemed guest. And gentlemen, let me tell you, the sun god's Inquisitor is an absolute baddie. He invited her to sit, though a heavy, uncomfortable silence immediately filled the room. Lord Varkin stammered through a clumsy introduction, thanking her for the sudden visit while trying to hide his nerves. This woman was Aquas, the High Inquisitor of the Sun God. Known as the Judge of Heresy, she introduced herself with an imposing aura, being the youngest person ever appointed to such a prestigious rank. She once beheaded 7 warlocks who signed pacts with demons and single-handedly dismantled a massive pagan ritual. Aquas is hailed as the continent's most powerful inquisitor, commanding so much influence that even the Empire bows to the Church's authority. Her political power far exceeds that of a mere provincial lord like Luke. So why would someone of her stature travel all the way to this backwater countryside? Varkin began explaining the situation with the nearby hidden dungeon, quickly assuring her that the threat had already been resolved. Then he cautiously asked for the true reason behind her visit. She revealed that she had traveled this far to speak with him regarding a divine oracle. However, before revealing the prophecy, she demanded to know exactly what had transpired in his territory recently. Left with no other choice, Luke spilled all the juicy details about the lone barbarian who had managed to defeat the Lich. He also confirmed that the evil entity in question was none other than Cardos Brenuelus Kessis. To prove his story, he presented the phylactery that still housed the Lich's soul as a life vessel. Even the stoic Inquisitor was visibly taken aback by this revelation. She unconsciously gripped her sun pendant in shock, trembling in fear over the cataclysmic events that had just unfolded in this land. With an ominous tone, Aquas demanded to know if this barbarian was currently residing within the estate. The Lord answered truthfully, confirming that the warrior was indeed still staying within their territory. However, the Inquisitor remained skeptical, struggling to believe that a threat like Cardos could be dispatched so easily. To prove his point, the Lord added that the barbarian had also bested Lord Kane in fair combat, signaling the rise of a new powerhouse. Intrigued, Aquas pressed further, asking which specific tribe this barbarian hailed from. But when the Lord mentioned the White Wastelands, the atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The Inquisitor immediately pictured a creature from the demon realm, as such beings were strictly forbidden from wandering the mortal plane. She realized that this anomaly might be the true reason she was guided here in the first place. Wasting no time, she formally requested an immediate audience with this enigmatic stranger. Meanwhile, oblivious to the political tension, Catal was busy examining his latest spoil of war. It was the crystal he had plucked from the Lich's scepter, a magical artifact that he decided to show to a mage later for proper appraisal. Checking the time, he realized he needed to head out, recalling the request he had received earlier that day. The captain had solemnly asked him to meet with the Inquisitor of the Sun God at the local church. He had also explicitly warned the barbarian to show the utmost respect to the holy woman during their encounter. After gathering his gear, Catal left his quarters and made his way directly to the sanctuary for the scheduled meeting. In this world, gods were not just myths. They were omnipresent beings who bestowed power upon the worthy and occasionally descended to the mortal plane. To honor them, humanity built grand shrines and churches, gathering in these sacred spaces to offer their worship and service. As he arrived at his destination and beheld the Church of the Sun God in person, Catal found himself genuinely starstruck by the building's sheer size and architectural majesty. The first captain briefed him on the procedure, noting that a guide would receive Catal the moment he stepped inside. Stepping through the doors, he was immediately struck by the grandeur of the church's interior. It was truly a sanctuary worthy of worshipping the sun god. 3 devoted nuns greeted him with respectful bows. They informed him that Inquisitor Aquaz was already awaiting his arrival. Feeling slightly out of place, he followed the nuns deeper into the building. They escorted him all the way to the inner sanctum. There he laid eyes on the sun god's youngest inquisitor, a prim and proper woman, though Catal was just amused by the spectacle. Seeing that she had achieved the faith's highest honor at such a tender age, he realized she must possess exceptional skill and devotion. However, a glimpse of his enigmatic smile seemed to catch the Inquisitor off guard. Cutting through the pleasantries, Catal asked why he had been summoned. As expected, she wanted to discuss the recent dungeon incident and the defeat of Kratos, a villain known for committing atrocities worldwide. By her estimation, only a true hero would possess the strength to stand against such a terrifying force of nature. Catal understood her logic, but the Kratos he saw was just a bumbling skeleton who flailed around until he destroyed himself. He could tell the Inquisitor had reservations about his version of events, but he could only report the truth as he witnessed it. To verify his claims, Aquaz proposed allowing her god to serve as a direct witness to their conversation. Lying in the presence of a deity triggers a violent reaction, essentially a divine lie detector that smites the dishonest. Given the reputation of brutish barbarians, she expected him to refuse, but she had never met a warrior quite like Catal. He was more than willing to face the test, seeing it as a perfect opportunity to experience divine power firsthand. She was baffled to see him brimming with excitement rather than apprehension. Typically, the mere thought of a deity scrutinizing your soul would induce terror. But for Catal, there was simply nothing to hide. After all, he wasn't the type to rely on deceit. Accepting his resolve, Inquisitor Aquaz initiated the sacred ritual. She offered a solemn prayer to the sun god watching from the zenith, the supreme overseer of the celestial star itself, invoking an omnipresent gaze to expose all falsehoods within this space. Immediately, an intense beam of sunlight descended upon the church. As divine power enveloped them, Catal was thrilled. This was exactly the fantasy RPG vibe he wanted. However, the sensation itself was undeniably strange. Beyond the light, he sensed a massive, all-powerful presence that defied human description. Curiously, Catal sensed that this divine all-seeing eye was actually looking at him with confusion. The two sat opposite one another as the deity's essence permeated the air. The Inquisitor was simply relieved that no immediate divine retribution was triggered. Now they could finally converse without the shadow of deceit. Within this pillar of light, absolutely no falsehood would be tolerated. Catal crossed his arms and nodded, readying himself for the interrogation. Under the watchful eye of the sun god, their discussion finally began. He calmly explained that the Lich self-destructed, and when the light didn't react, she assumed this barbarian was just incredibly lucky. She surmises that Kratos must have drained his energy preparing for resurrection. Otherwise, at full power, this barbarian wouldn't be alive. Her internal monologue is cut short when Catal asks if her doubts have finally been cleared. She confirms they are and apologizes for her earlier rudeness, but the barbarian simply smiles, finding the situation rather entertaining. Aquaz then presses for the truth, asking if he really hails from the white snowfield. Our boy answers directly that he is indeed from those frozen lands, confirming it a second time when she asks again. This revelation shocks her, as it proves he belongs to the demon realm and might be the gray barbarian from the Emperor's ancient legends. Suddenly, the hero turns the tables, catching her off guard by asking exactly why she came to this territory. Treading carefully, she explains that she is only here to attend to a personal matter. Catal's expression hardens, and he questions if this personal matter is just an excuse to verify if he is an unclean being. Tense and cornered, the girl tries to feign ignorance, claiming she doesn't understand his implication. Our boy notes that while he isn't certain, it seems excessive for a god to observe a mortal merely to catch a lie. She realizes she can't deny it, knowing that no falsehood can remain hidden before the eyes of a god. Conceding the point, she admits he's right, prompting him to ask if this was her mission from the very start. Aquas denies it immediately, explaining that he wasn't actually her original target. She reveals that an oracle descended from the sun god, and upon arriving, she suspected he might be the one mentioned in the prophecy. Once again, she bows her head, apologizing for concealing her true intentions. But he responds calmly, brushing it off and noting that he finds the whole situation rather intriguing. Catal then presses for the oracle's actual message, leaving the girl conflicted about sharing such confidential information. Ultimately, she reveals the oracle's words to him, though the specific details are hidden from the audience. Our boy looks genuinely shocked by what he hears as the scene abruptly cuts. Later, the girl is standing by the church window when the sound of approaching footsteps catches her attention. She turns around to find the lord of the territory walking toward her. Noticing her demeanor, he gently asks if something is weighing on her mind. Speaking softly, she admits that she has finally met with the barbarian. However, that encounter has only left her thoughts more tangled than before. She explains that she is now certain he is a barbarian from the demon realm's white snowfield. Lord Barkin is visibly shaken, especially when Aquas adds that no intelligence has ever leaked from that region before now. The Lord desperately wishes this connection were merely a rumor, knowing that if the truth gets out, it will shake the world to its core. Countless factions crave to explore the snowfield, including the Emperor, and his involvement would unleash unimaginable chaos. Aquas, however, quickly reassures him that there is no need to panic just yet. They intend to handle the Lich situation personally, while keeping the barbarian's true nature a secret from the public. With a sigh of relief, the Lord asks the burning question: "Are all snowfield barbarians like Catal?" She shakes her head. If every barbarian possessed his capabilities, they would have conquered the world long ago. Barkin reflects that while barbarians possess immense physical strength, it is usually balanced by a lack of intellect. The very idea of that raw power combined with genuine intelligence is a nightmare he scarcely dares to imagine. Snapping back to reality, he nervously asks about the rumors regarding the current barbarian king, specifically if he possesses both brains and brawn. Aquas confirms that she has met the king once, and he is indeed a breed apart from the others. The Lord muses that a meeting between Catal and the barbarian king would be fascinating, but Aquas immediately dismisses the idea as dangerous. Internally, she knows that the relationship between the barbarians and the servants of the gods has always been volatile, and the rising power of the barbarian tribes is not a threat they can afford to take lightly. The Lord questions the secrecy, asking why the oracle's message required such a private meeting. The girl replies that she simply needed to verify a single detail. Gazing out the window, she explains that she had to determine if Catal was truly human or just a mimic, prompting the Lord to ask what kind of prophecy would cast such doubt. She recites the oracle's words, but just like before, the actual content remains hidden from the audience. However, the Lord's face twists into an expression of pure shock upon hearing it. The scene shifts to the Lord's private chamber, where he asks the barbarian how he's holding up. Our boy confirms he's doing fine, though he wonders why he was summoned in the first place. The nobleman admits there is one specific matter they need to address. He clarifies that while he wouldn't exactly call this an apology, he has prepared a reward for Catal's aid in defending the territory. Without another word, the Lord places a pouch on the table, drawing Catal's curious gaze. He's slightly surprised to see what appears to be a simple leather bag. Catching his reaction, the man explains that this is no ordinary pouch and urges him to inspect it. Our boy picks it up, immediately sensing a strange aura radiating from the object. Lord Barkin reveals it's a spatial artifact capable of storing multiple items, limited only by its internal volume. He adds that the magical space inside is nearly as vast as the reception hall they're currently sitting in. The barbarian is stunned. This is the first true artifact he's ever laid his hands on. The Lord explains that it can swallow objects larger than its opening, prompting Catal to test it immediately. He hefts his massive axe, ready to see if the magic holds true, skeptical that such a colossal weapon could possibly fit through such a tiny opening. But in an instant, the pouch swallows the axe whole, leaving him speechless as the Lord explains that retrieving it requires only a touch and a thought. Our boy follows the instructions, and with a spark of excitement in his eyes, he effortlessly draws the axe back out. The Lord declares this a gift for saving his territory, and seeing the boy's delight, he considers the debt fully repaid. Yet a deeper anxiety plagues the Lord's mind. The unresolved prophecy weighs heavily on him, as does the silence from his distant lands. The swordmaster's warning echoes in his memory. Creatures from the demon realm are surfacing, signaling the start of a catastrophic event. Connecting this to this prophecy, the Lord recalls the chilling details mentioned by Aquas. A great evil is destined to descend upon this territory and spread to engulf the world, the heart of the oracle's prophecy. Around the same time, the grim truth about the Varkan territory begins to surface within a scattered network of villages. Suddenly, contact with one settlement is lost, though initially it is dismissed as a minor issue. But when a group from a neighboring village is sent to investigate, they vanish without a trace. The Lord dispatches his official guards to intervene, yet they too meet the same mysterious fate. Only then does he realize that a truly catastrophic threat has emerged. Sometime later at the Mercenary Guild, Rosa flags our boy down with an urgent request from Lord Barkin. She explains that the objective is to investigate the village that recently went dark. The task is merely to assess the situation, but she notes that the reward is suspiciously high for such a simple job. Enticed by the offer, Catal finds the mission appealing and decides to accept it immediately. A gathering is soon organized for the mission participants. Among the arrivals is a priestess who has also signed up for the task. Recognizing her, our boy immediately steps forward to approach her. She looks genuinely surprised to run into him, her eyes immediately drawn to his brand new custom outfit. He explains that his old snowfield gear finally fell apart, so he commissioned this fresh design himself. The priestess asks if he's here for the mission as well, and he confirms that he signed up. He remarks that he couldn't pass up such an intriguing job, leading her to think that this barbarian is truly one of a kind. Our boy then asks why she's flying solo, noticing that her usual companions, Tyrannus and Cassin, are missing. She assumes they probably took one look at the mission details and decided to pass, taking a moment to scan the surrounding crowd. Catal realizes that the turnout is shockingly lower than he expected. He assumed a simple high-paying gig would attract a swarm of mercenaries, yet there are fewer than 10 people here. The priestess explains that despite the good pay, there's a catch. This mission is far more dangerous than it looks. She shares a rumor that the last guard sent to the village never returned, implying the situation is grave. Even with that risk, Catal points out that the attendance numbers are still suspiciously low. Hesitating for a moment, the priestess leans in to share the real reason everyone stayed away. She reveals that Lady Aquas is involved, a name that catches him completely off guard. It turns out that Aquas, the terrifying heretic inquisitor of the sun god, is personally participating in this mission. She adds that few mercenaries dare to work near her, admitting she's terrified the girl might just kill her on a whim. Our boy immediately reassures her, claiming the Inquisitor is actually quite polite and kind. When the priestess presses him for details, he casually confirms that they are friends. She struggles to process the idea that a ruthless heretic inquisitor and a barbarian could possibly be buddies. Catal steps forward to greet her warmly, but Aquas responds with ice-cold indifference, claiming she doesn't recall ever being his friend. He laughs it off, suggesting that they turn over a new leaf and become friends right now. The Inquisitor coldly ignores the suggestion, turning her attention to the priestess instead to ask if she is a follower of Lady Calrosia. Our boy is surprised that she recognizes the priestess's affiliation so easily. The Inquisitor then questions why the priestess is present, noting that Calrosia's followers are currently in a rest period, meaning only high-ranking members should be active. However, she quickly withdraws her suspicion, admitting she might be mistaken, as it is impossible for her to know the inner workings of every religious order. Just then, the guard captain arrives at the rendezvous point with his soldiers. Our boy recognizes him immediately and offers a cheerful greeting. The captain formally welcomes the participants, confirms the roster, and announces the start of the mission. With that, the group begins their march forward. Seeing everyone gathered together like this, our boy feels the atmosphere resembles the start of a raid. He asks the Inquisitor if their departure means the predicted time has come. Taken aback, she hesitates for a moment, admitting that she cannot say for certain. The Oracle's prophecy never reveals exact timing, so it's possible the village simply lost contact for mundane reasons. The barbarian smiles, noting that the possibility of danger still remains. Eventually, the group arrives at their destination. Upon seeing the sight, Catal and the priestess freeze in their tracks. They are left completely stunned by the scene ahead. A silent, seemingly peaceful village lies stretched out before them. The guard captain scans the perimeter with sharp eyes, unsettled by the unnatural quiet. He asks the Inquisitor if she detects any presence, but she calmly reports sensing absolutely nothing. Taking this in, the captain concludes that the villagers must have already fled. He firmly orders the squad to split up and scour the area for any clues. The team acknowledges the command and immediately fans out to begin the search. Yet the captain remains on edge. This small settlement barely supported 100 souls, and somehow every single one of them has vanished without a trace, leaving him desperate for answers. As the investigation gets underway, one of the soldiers freezes the moment he steps into a nearby house. His eyes widen in disbelief at the sight of food set out on the table. He urgently calls the captain over to report the strange anomaly. At first, the captain assumes the panicked villagers abandoned their meals mid-flight. However, the soldier drops a chilling detail. The food is still warm. The captain's expression shifts to pure shock. He steps inside to stare at the steaming meal, his mind racing because contact with the village was lost days ago. Furthermore, previous investigators had already been sent here, and none of them ever returned. He demands to know if there are any tracks or signs of hiding, but the answer is a terrifying negative. Despite the impossibility of the situation, he orders them to keep searching. Everywhere they look, the area is teeming with signs of recent activity, yet there isn't a single soul in sight. The captain checks in with the other teams, only to hear the same unsettling report. There are clear traces of habitation, but absolutely no evidence suggesting anyone actually left. Desperate for answers, he turns to Aquas, asking if she has any insight into this anomaly. Visibly distressed, she admits that she is just as baffled as he is. Running out of options, the captain poses the same question to our boy. However, Catal merely shakes his head, having found no physical clues either. The captain's frustration mounts, until our boy calmly suggests they simply ask someone who actually knows the truth. The suggestion hits at the captain like a bolt of lightning, leaving him stunned. Our boy reveals that they aren't alone, claiming that an outsider is standing right among them. The captain's heart skips a beat, and he stares at the barbarian in utter confusion. Catal explains that he senses a foreign presence, suddenly pointing a finger at a woman blending into the crowd who definitely doesn't belong. The mysterious woman offers a faint, intrigued smile, impressed that he saw through her flawless disguise. Catal retorts that it's only natural to notice when a stranger suddenly appears right in front of you. Letting out a light, amused laugh, the woman remarks that she usually remains completely undetected. She notes that not even the sun god's Inquisitor was able to sense her presence. She observes Catal closely, noting that the barbarian shows no signs of a mystical awakening. With her curiosity piqued, she demands to know exactly who he is. But before our boy can answer, the guard captain suddenly screams for everyone to fall back immediately. His face twists in pure distress as he realizes the danger they are in. Aqua whispers that she still senses absolutely nothing, no presence whatsoever. This revelation leaves both the captain and the priestess shaken to their very core. If the church's top Inquisitor can't detect it, this entity is either harmless or an evil so advanced it masks its own existence. The mysterious woman clicks her tongue in disappointment, admitting she had hoped to quietly tail them and scout their territory. But suddenly, her features begin to contort as she shifts into her true form. Once the gruesome transformation is complete, she flashes a wicked grin, declaring her intent to drag the barbarian down to hell as her slave. The demoness unveils her terrifying true appearance and unleashes a massive sphere of destructive purple energy. Everyone stares in paralyzed shock as she ascends, hovering ominously right before their eyes. The guard captain screams for everyone to run and save themselves. But the group quickly realizes that escape is no longer an option. A transparent magical barrier has trapped them, and every desperate attempt to break through fails. The demoness announces to the village that this domain is under her absolute control and no one will leave. With a sadistic sneer, she declares that every soul present is now her prey. Trembling in terror, the priestess identifies the entity as a named demon, one of the most dangerous classes of monsters in existence. She prays desperately, begging her god to deliver them from this living nightmare. But Catal gently pats her on the head and calmly reassures her that he is right there, and he will not abandon her. He asks for clarification on what exactly a named demon is and how it differs from the rest. With a trembling voice, the priestess struggles to maintain her composure. She explains that while most demons are merely weak, fragmented spirits, there are true primordial beings born from the deepest pits of darkness. Demons powerful enough to choose their own names, capable of plunging entire kingdoms into absolute chaos. Our boy quickly realizes that the entity standing before them is exactly that kind of monster. Spotting the distinctive horns, the priestess identifies her as Ashidiar, a legendary demoness who wreaked havoc centuries ago. Hearing this, the barbarian asks if they can smash through the barrier, but the priestess cries out in despair. This area has become the demon's domain, and the only escape is to kill her, a feat that seems virtually impossible. However, the moment our boy casually places his hand against the barrier, the magical construct instantly begins to crack and shatter. Chuckling to himself, he decides to watch the drama play out a bit longer, assuring the shocked priestess that everything is fine. Meanwhile, the demoness turns her attention to the Inquisitor, mocking her failure to see through the deception. The Inquisitor realizes that the faint signs of life in the empty village were nothing but illusions, an elaborate trap designed to lure humans into the demon's grasp. Enraged, she lashes out, calling the demon vile and despicable for such underhanded tactics. But Ashidiar remains completely unfazed by the insults. In the background, our boy watches the show, happily munching on popcorn while wearing 3D glasses. He muses that summoning a named demon usually requires a massive sacrifice of souls, far more than a single village could provide. Furthermore, expanding a domain this large without being detected should have been impossible. She is stunned that a demoness managed to infiltrate their world completely undetected, but the intruder just sneers, refusing to reveal her secrets. Enraged, the Inquisitor condemns her as a vile plague sent to defile the Holy Land. This outburst only makes the demon girl throw her head back in laughter. She retorts by calling the woman an obedient lapdog, mocking her faith and questioning if her precious god can actually save her now. Her expression then turns grave as she declares that the world's fabric is cracking, and this realm no longer belongs solely to humans and their deities. She recounts an ancient war from long ago, where gods and humans fought fiercely against the forces of evil, ultimately claiming victory and banishing the darkness to the deepest dimensions. Proudly introducing herself as the demon of gravity, she reveals she has waited centuries in hell for this exact moment. She vows to wipe away the shame of that past defeat and blanket the entire world in darkness. Aquas counters with fury, insisting the world belongs to the light and demanding this disgusting creature return to the abyss. Wasting no time, she initiates a sacred ritual. Calling upon her god, a massive pillar of brilliant golden light engulfs her entire body. As she begins to morph into a divine warrior, the scene shifts to the sidelines. Our hero realizes the legends are true. The enemy really does politely wait during a magical transformation sequence. When the light fades, she stands clad in divine golden armor, looking every bit the part of a holy knight. The demoness, however, just finds the flashy display amusing. In response, she summons a massive crystalline scythe to her hand. With the posturing finally over, the real battle begins. The Inquisitor charges forward, closing the distance at blinding speed. They collide with violent force, triggering a massive explosion of energy that shakes the very ground. In the wake of the massive blast, both combatants are hurled backward by the force. The demon girl lands confidently, mocking the divine hunters for their lack of dignity and ignorance of combat etiquette. The Inquisitor glares back, her eyes burning with intense fury. She digs her heels into the ground and launches herself forward at full speed once more. The demon stands her ground, completely fearless, then vanishes in a blur, leaving nothing but an afterimage behind. Unable to track her opponent's speed, the divine girl is completely outplayed. Suddenly, the demon materializes behind her, forcing a split-second reaction. She barely raises her shield to block, sparks bursting wildly from the heavy impact. The demon smirks, signaling that the Inquisitor is about to be crushed. She gathers a concentrated surge of dark energy at her fingertip and unleashes it at point-blank range. The Inquisitor struggles to hold her ground, but the overwhelming force steadily drives her back. The pressure becomes too great, and as the demoness's power pierces her guard, her defense shatters. But in that critical moment, the Inquisitor begins reciting holy scripture. Radiant light bursts forth, manifesting into a defensive holy barrier. The sudden surge of divinity forces the demon girl to retreat, giving the divine girl just enough time to get back on her feet. The demoness is genuinely shocked that someone so young can wield scripture at such a high level, forcing her to admit that the display is actually quite impressive. Undeterred, Aquas chants a new scripture, invoking a holy fire meant to incinerate all evil. She hurls the spell at the demoness, who reacts with lightning-fast reflexes, meeting the assault head-on and countering with a strike drenched in dark energy. The two opposing forces collide in a violent explosion, and against all odds, the demoness manages to shatter and deflect the light. Aquas grits her teeth, visibly stunned that her attack was brushed aside so cleanly. They immediately begin trading full-force blows, neither side willing to yield, as their weapons crash against each other in a rapid-fire flurry. One blade radiates holy light while the other drips with darkness, their conflict growing so intense that the very terrain around them begins to crumble under the pressure. The priestess trembles violently as the shockwaves wash over her. Other party members scramble to retreat, unable to withstand the crushing aura of the battle. The combatants clash relentlessly, striking with lethal intent, and the volatile mix of holy and demonic energy makes the air suffocatingly heavy. Catal, however, watches the spectacle with a grin, finding the chaos extremely entertaining. Desperate, the priestess turns to him and begs for his assistance to save Lady Aquas. Our boy calmly confirms that he could help, but then casually asks why he should bother. His cold indifference leaves the priestess completely speechless, but he explains that stepping in would ruin the fun, even if he is itching to fight a demon himself. For the moment, he chooses to remain a spectator and simply enjoy the show. The priestess, however, is left completely dumbfounded, realizing this chaotic reality is nothing like the scenario she imagined. Meanwhile, the Divine Knight and the Demoness trade devastating blows in a blur of motion. A massive collision of energy forces both combatants to skid backward. Ashtiar begrudgingly admits the Inquisitor truly earns the title of God's hunting dog. But despite possessing superior strength, the Demoness feels the pressure of a bad elemental matchup. She realizes that playing by the rules will only make this battle drag on dangerously long, so she decides to fight dirty to seize the upper hand. Suddenly, Ashtiar abruptly shifts her momentum, and the knight instantly recognizes the vile intent behind the move. Ignoring her opponent completely, the demoness lunges straight for the defenseless party members, who are too slow to react. But the divine knight intercepts just in time, blocking the strike and saving their lives. The group trembles in terror, witnessing the horrifying power gap between these two monsters. However, this noble act forces the Inquisitor into a disadvantageous position, compelling her to focus entirely on deflecting attacks away from the bystanders. Seething with rage, she curses her opponent's cowardice, while Ashatiar responds with mocking laughter, reminding her that demons don't care about fairness. It is a taunt that only fuels the Inquisitor's burning fury. She begins chanting a new spell, manifesting a sacred barrier around herself. Aqua shouts for her party members to get inside the safe zone immediately. They scramble into the circle, thanking her for the protection, while the demon girl simply watches them, wearing a smug, arrogant smile. She mocks the Inquisitor for wasting such precious scripture on defense. Provoked by the insult, the Inquisitor steps out, intending to strike her down. The demoness welcomes the challenge, stepping forward to meet her head-on. Aquas grips her blade and unleashes a precise, wholly infused slash. But the demoness deflects it effortlessly, moving with the agility of a gymnast to close the distance. She sneers, claiming no one will remember this sacrifice. She twists the knife deeper, warning that a loss here would disgrace the sun god. Yet to win and raise her god's prestige, she would have to drop the barrier protecting her friends. Aqua stiffens, torn between rage and caution as she senses the obvious trap. She chooses to ignore the taunt, bracing herself for the enemy's next move. Suddenly, a massive surge of dark energy floods the entire battlefield. Aquas barely withstands the pressure behind her shield as the demon levitates into the air, completely cloaked in malevolent power. A split second later, she senses a massive presence rushing straight at her. A dark figure materializes directly in front of her face, and a violent explosion instantly erupts on impact. The girl is driven back, planting her feet and digging in to brace herself, but her eyes widen in shock. As the demoness continues her advance without a single pause, the demon girl unleashes undulating waves of tentacle-like dark energy that instantly surround the Inquisitor from every conceivable angle. Pushed to her absolute limit, she frantically begins chanting a holy scripture. But the demoness suddenly materializes from the energy pool right beside her, intent on silence. She slams Aquas into the ground, clamping a hand over her mouth to cut off the chant. Without hesitation, she raises her weapon to deliver the final killing blow. The Inquisitor barely manages to lift her shield in time to intercept the strike. But spiderweb cracks instantly spread across the surface, making defense nearly impossible. With a smug, cruel smile, the demoness shatters the shield completely into dust and simply flicks her finger. This motion unleashes a massive, overwhelming surge of demonic energy. The Inquisitor is instantly bound in chains of dark power and takes the full brunt of the blast. She screams in pure agony as her holy barrier utterly collapses. Her party members tremble in terror, knowing they won't survive long without her protection. Seeing their fear, the demon girl laughs cruelly, announcing she'll have them all for dessert. But first, she wants to get a taste of the noble god's so-called hunting dog. Just as she prepares the killing blow, a commanding voice orders her to halt. It is none other than Katal, stepping in to declare that the violence ends now. The demoness freezes, completely taken aback by the sudden interruption, unable to comprehend when he arrived or how he managed to mask his presence entirely. In the blink of an eye, Katal effortlessly launches her high into the air, sending her flying before she comes crashing violently back down to the earth. Turning his back on the enemy, he reaches out to the Inquisitor to check on her condition. However, the girl is too stunned to respond, her mind racing as she recognizes him as the warrior who defeated Swordmaster Cain. Meanwhile, Ashatiar's rage boils over, her eyes glowing a menacing blood red. Both the Barbarian and the Inquisitor turn their attention to the demon as she rises from the debris. She spits venomous insults at Katal, absolutely livid that he dared to interrupt her feast. Standing calmly with arms crossed, he declares the Inquisitor is his friend, and he will not let her fall. The demoness sneers, revealing she had planned to make him her personal plaything. But Katal sharply retorts that he has no intention of becoming anyone's toy. Raising her weapon, she screams that he will die for his insolence. The Inquisitor struggles to her feet, desperately urging the Barbarian to retreat, warning him that this monster is far too powerful for him to defeat. Our boy calmly replies that his strength is more than sufficient. But she insists that physical power alone is meaningless here. Only divinity can banish a demon, a cosmic law as old as time itself, especially within a domain where only gods can stand their ground. Our boy pauses, taking a brief moment to consider her warning, then points out that she is in no condition to continue the fight. The girl retorts that she serves the divine, and therefore, she must stand against this demoness no matter the cost. Impressed by her unyielding dedication, he gently places a hand on her head, praising her resolve. Then, casually stepping forward, he tells her to leave the rest to him, leaving the girl completely speechless, as he admits that he has always wanted to try fighting a demon. Ashatiar lets out a soft, mocking laugh, doubting he stands a chance, but our boy simply smirks, inviting her to come and test that theory herself. Licking her lips in anticipation, she agrees that this might actually be fun. In the very next instant, she steps out of the rift and materializes directly in front of Catal. The Inquisitor stares in absolute shock, stunned by the sudden attack. However, before the demon can even touch the barbarian, he simply clenches his fist and delivers a devastating punch straight to her head. Before the demoness can even react, her head is completely obliterated. The gruesome sight leaves the Inquisitor paralyzed with shock. With nothing but a bare fist, our boy crushed a powerful demoness like she was rotten fruit. However, he soon notices her corpse beginning to twitch. Dark energy swirls violently around her neck as her head begins to regenerate. He offers a faint smile, amused that she can recover from total destruction. She glares back with hateful disbelief, convinced that no ordinary human could do this. Yet our boy calmly introduces himself as nothing more than a simple barbarian. It is an answer she simply refuses to accept. Her senses scan him, but she detects absolutely no aura, magic, or mysticism. She cannot comprehend how such terrifying strength exists without supernatural aid. Deciding to test his limits, she conjures a demonic portal behind his back. A wicked smile creeps across her face as she prepares to strike. She flashes through the void to attack from the rear, certain his mortal frame will crumble. But her smirk vanishes the instant the barbarian buries a devastating punch deep into her chest. A fountain of dark blood immediately bursts from her mouth. For the first time in her existence, she experiences true, agonizing pain. The impact launches her through the air like an insect caught in a hurricane. A massive gaping hole has been punched clean through her torso, and the force of her landing shatters the ground beneath her. A small crater forms beneath her. Trembling, she cannot comprehend how a simple punch carries such destructive power. Our boy calmly observes her regenerating once again. While she finally understands the terrifying truth, this strength is not enhanced by aura or magic. It is pure, overwhelming physical power. Catal grows genuinely curious about the mechanism behind her rapid regeneration. Without hesitation, he stomps the ground with such force that shockwaves crack the rocks around him. In an instant, he launches himself toward her at insane speed. The demon girl barely has time to guard and summons her demonic hammer before he closes the distance. His violent punch lands squarely on her face, smashing her headless body back into the ground once again. Dense dark energy erupts from her neck as her body becomes covered in a thick demonic aura. The barbarian watches in surprise as within seconds, her head regenerates once more and she rises again, fully restored. He smiles slightly, noticing that her head keeps returning every time it is destroyed, and he wonders if it might be her life source. Ashitiar is furious at this humiliation. She mocks the idea that brute force alone could defeat her, and senses that the barbarian is not even using his full strength yet. With pride, she declares herself the demoness of gravity, and asks how he dares to continue fighting her with only raw power. Our boy stares at her silently for a moment, and then calmly mentions that she is not very impressive. Those simple words shatter her demonic pride. Screaming in rage, she unleashes her true power. Dark gravitational energy gathers in her hands and forms a massive black warhammer. She swings it with enough force to crush giant boulders, but he blocks the attack with his bare hand. This causes her to freeze in shock as his grip suppresses the hammer's gravity completely. With a single punch, he shatters the weapon and, smashing her head apart for the third time. As she regenerates yet again, disbelief overwhelms her mind. Her gravity power can compress the weight of castle walls into a single strike. Yet an ordinary barbarian without even a trace of mystic power has not only stopped it, but destroyed her weapon as well. In rage, she fires a massive beam of dark energy at our boy, convinced this will end him. However, the barbarian does not step back. Instead, he stands firm and punches straight into the beam. His punch collides with the demonic energy, creating a massive explosion of white light. The overwhelming strength completely erases the attack, and the shockwave slams directly into a Ashitiar. From a distance, Akur watches in shock and terror, questioning what she is witnessing. According to legends, this demoness once destroyed an entire kingdom alone, yet now that same legendary demoness is being brutally dominated by bare fists. Despite his overwhelming assault, our boy notices that her body is still regenerating. This makes him realize that killing her with pure physical force is nearly impossible. Hearing this realization, the demon girl reacts, and a cunning smile slowly creeps across her face. For the first time in her life, she feels truly overwhelmed by such intense pressure. Admitting his superior strength, she demands to know his true identity once more. Yet, he calmly repeats his claim that he is nothing but an ordinary barbarian. She knows it's a lie, but the mixture of fear and thrill strangely excites her. Deciding on one final test, her entire body dissolves into liquid dark energy, slipping out from beneath his feet and ascending rapidly into the sky. The witnesses watch in shock as the dark energy coalesces into a massive black sphere, ripping up the earth and pulling debris into its core. Hovering high above, the demon girl issues a challenge to the barbarian, declaring that she will now tear him apart with the full extent of her power. Channeling every ounce of her energy, she prepares her most devastating attack, shaping dark gravity into countless razor-sharp thorns aimed directly at him. Yet despite the apocalyptic display, he remains completely unfazed. Meanwhile, the Inquisitor instantly recognizes the extreme danger. She believes that brute force is useless here and that only divine power can stop the attack. With a shout, the demoness unleashes her final command. An endless torrent of dark thorns pours from the sky like black rain, yet our boy doesn't move an inch. Instead, he begins spinning his arms at absolutely blinding speed. A violent cyclone erupts, shattering every thorn to create an impenetrable shield of wind around him. Ashtiar cries out in pure shock, unable to comprehend the sheer monstrosity standing before her. Her disbelief only deepens as our hero suddenly launches himself into the fray, accelerating with such explosive force that he instantly shatters the sound barrier. In that critical fraction of a second, the Inquisitor recognizes the opening and acts immediately. She chants a sacred verse from her scripture, commanding the divine light to purge all evil. The energy solidifies into a radiant axe that lands in the barbarian's grip, feeling like a direct gift from the gods. She screams that she has poured her remaining power into the blade and urges him to finish the job. He tightens his grip on the hilt and coldly declares that the battle ends here. With a mighty roar, he brings the axe down in a devastating vertical slash, cleaving straight through Ashtiar's demonic form with terrifying ease. In that fleeting instant, the demoness realizes her defeat is absolute. Holy fire incinerates her from the inside out, forcing a scream of genuine agony from her throat. Moments later, her scorched body collapses to the ground, lifeless. Katal strolls over calmly and admits that the skirmish was actually somewhat entertaining. With her final breaths, the demoness bitterly admits the shame of being sent back to hell in such humiliation. Yet she considers this a victory of sorts, having confirmed that a monster like him exists in this realm. As she fades, she demands his name, and he answers casually without a second thought. Aqua screams in sheer terror, begging him to stay silent, but it is already too late. Using the last reserves of her strength, the demon girl lets out a broken maniacal laugh. She opens a telepathic channel, ordering every demon to engrave the name Katal the Barbarian into their memories forever. The Inquisitor screams in desperation as the creature prepares her final act. The demoness commands her followers to devour her memories the moment she dies. They must learn everything about him, she signals with one final insane cackle. She declares that from this moment on, the barbarian belongs to their dark world. Terrifying entities immediately begin to invade his mind, leaving him standing there, momentarily confused. Inside his subconscious, massive demonic forms manifest, appearing like eldritch cosmic worms. But his mental fortitude is absolute, crushing the intruders effortlessly as if they were nothing. He asks the dying demoness what she tried to do, mentioning he felt a strange sensation in his body. She freezes in shock, unable to comprehend why the darkness failed to devour his body and soul. Tired of the games, he decides not to waste another word. Our boy plants his foot on her remains and crushes them completely, destroying her forever. Aqua screams in sheer horror, and the priestess is equally paralyzed by the brutal display. As the purple barrier fades with the demon's death, the barbarian stretches his limbs with a satisfied smirk. He turns to the girl and casually asks if the mission is finally complete. News of the incident spreads like wildfire throughout the Gehenta kingdom. Reports focus on the quiet region of Barkan, where contact with a local village was suddenly lost. Rumors circulate that a terrifying high-level demoness had descended upon the area. Newspapers quickly identify the culprit as Demoness Ashtiar, blaming her for the disaster. The territory's ruler sits alone in his office, completely overwhelmed by shock and grief, struggling to comprehend how such a horrific crisis could befall his land. Still, he clings to a silver lining. The Sun God Inquisitor managed to repel the demoness, buying them precious time to regroup. The scene shifts back to our boy, who notes that the entire territory seems shaken by the recent chaos. Eyes still closed, the Inquisitor replies that the panic is to be expected given the gravity of the situation. Suddenly, she stands up to leave, but he urges her to rest a while longer since her body is still healing. However, the girl insists that she cannot stay. She must return to the Holy Land to report everything that transpired. Katal nods, understanding and respecting her decision. Without looking at him, she softly calls out his name, which catches him slightly off guard. She bows deeply, expressing her heartfelt gratitude, and admits that without his intervention, she would have remained trapped by the demoness. Our boy nods and gently replies that he only did what anyone would do for a friend. Curious, he asks if this means they are officially friends now. The girl is slightly surprised by the idea of a barbarian and a sun god inquisitor being friends. She reminds him of her status within the Holy Order, and asks if he seriously still wants her friendship. He simply wonders if there is any reason they cannot be friends. After thinking for a moment, The girl admits that there is no reason at all. Hearing this, he smiles and declares that they are friends. In response, the girl offers a small, genuine smile of her own. He admits that there is something he is curious about, which catches her attention. He asks if the old warning is true, that one should never reveal their real name to a demon. She nods gravely, confirming the danger. Demons use names to perform a specific curse called branding. It places an invisible, dark mark on a person's soul, acting like a beacon to attract other evil entities. This effectively turns the person into constant prey, hunted wherever they go. The only escape is to have the mark erased through an ancient baptismal ritual or by dying. Concerned, he asks if he has already fallen victim to this branding. She reassures him, explaining that he is lucky and currently bears no mark. However, she warns that his name is now known to the denizens of Hell, and they will recognize him. Without a mark, they cannot locate him unless they meet face to face, though privately she knows he has been identified as a target. But since Hell lacks a way to track him down, it doesn't seem like an immediate threat. The barbarian reflects on the battle, noting that despite his strength, he couldn't kill the demoness with physical force alone. Aquaz explains that demons are fundamentally different from normal creatures, and their nature is mysterious. She recounts history, explaining that the gods first created humans and gave them life. Humans were foolish and driven by instinct, yet the gods did not interfere in their world. Later, beings from another dimension invaded and slaughtered humans, prompting the gods to descend and name these aggressors demons. After the confrontation, the gods sealed them back in their own world. With divine assistance, human civilization finally found peace and began to progress. Over time, however, demons began interfering again for reasons unknown. And as she emphasizes, these demons can only be truly defeated by holy divine power. To combat this resurgence, the gods bestowed fragments of their divine power upon their most loyal followers. Our hero finally grasps the grim truth. Demons can never be truly eradicated because they hail from an entirely different dimension. She confirms his theory, explaining that since they lack physical forms native to this world, brute strength alone is useless against them. The barbarian worries that an unchecked invasion spells doom for everyone, but she assures him that high-ranking named demons cannot cross over easily. However, recent disturbances and abnormal dungeon cycles suggest the sealed demon realm is leaking into theirs, a shift that began exactly 1 year ago. Catel's eyes widen in shock as the timeline clicks into place. That date coincides perfectly with the moment he embarked on his final quest within the frozen snowfields. With the heavy exposition finished, the girl offers her gratitude one last time and prepares to take her leave. She extends an open invitation to visit her order, assuring him that he will always find a warm welcome among them. He offers a rare smile and promises to pay them a visit when he can. As they part ways, her carriage slowly rumbles forward, putting distance between them. Resting inside the cabin, she realizes that her body still hasn't fully recovered from the ordeal. Yet, duty calls. She must report to the Saintess immediately, though her thoughts keep drifting back to the barbarian. She can't help but wonder why the sun god never provided a single prophecy regarding such a mysterious and overwhelmingly powerful warrior. Elsewhere, deep within the Empire's Grand Palace, Master Cain strides through the ornately decorated corridors. The old man is visibly exhausted, drained by a grueling meeting with the Emperor. Suddenly, a sharp voice echoes through the hallway, interrupting his thoughts. The stranger casually remarks on how particularly haggard Cain looks today. Cain instantly tenses up and spins around to face a long-haired man he recognizes immediately. Standing before him is the Grand Master of the Magic Tower, the leader of the world's most formidable mages. Maintaining his composure, the Tower Master questions the reason for the Elder's visit. Cain explains that he has arrived to submit a comprehensive report regarding his latest mission. Intrigued, the Master asks if this concerns the reconnaissance into the demon world, specifically the Forest of Silence. He leans in, curious to know exactly what kind of environment Cain encountered there. Cain's expression instantly darkens as he describes a completely unnatural realm that defies all logic. True to its name, the forest is devoid of sound, and even mystical detection fails. Shouts produce no vibrations whatsoever. Amidst that suffocating silence, their soldiers began to vanish, one by one. He shudders, describing the location as nothing short of loathsome and cursed. He questions the Emperor's desperation to conquer such a place. But the Tower Master notes that the minds of the powerful are often inscrutable. Yet even he admits to harboring a deep fascination with that realm. The secrets hidden within the demon world are simply too alluring for him to ignore. Cain, however, does not share this enthusiasm and vows to stay far away from it. But before he can finish speaking, the Tower Master suddenly raises a hand and snaps his fingers, summoning a glowing magic circle on the floor. In an instant, their physical forms dissolve into pure light and vanish from the room. A moment later, they rematerialize within a vast star-filled void. Recognizing this as high-level spatial magic, Kane demands to know what the master is planning. The master smiles, casually asking if Kane happened to encounter a specific individual during his mission. Kane's expression freezes in terror. Realizing the Tower Master had placed an observation spell on him, he demands to know when it was cast. The mage laughs, revealing he did it during their last meeting, simply because observing others is his favorite hobby. With a heavy sigh, the old man asks what else there is to discuss, given that the master has already seen everything. Changing the subject, the Tower Master asks for his honest opinion regarding the barbarian from the snowy fields. Kane admits that even he isn't entirely sure what to make of the savage warrior just yet. The Tower Master casually notes that this barbarian displayed enough power to defeat a seasoned swordmaster and crush the Lich Kartos like a mere insect. This stuns the old man, who had no idea the barbarian was responsible for the Lich's defeat, though the master notes it hasn't been officially confirmed. However, rumors are already spreading through the magic tower that Kartos' resurrection was a complete failure. The mage adds that he personally visited the lair to pay his final respects. Surprisingly, the undead Lich was one of the few friends he had left in this world. Kane is taken aback, surprised that a transcendent being like the Tower Master is capable of feeling sorrow. The master reflects that after living for so long, friendship becomes a necessity, before casually mentioning that the Lich's lair was empty of valuable artifacts. Growing suspicious, Kane asks if perhaps the items were retrieved immediately after the Lich's death. The Tower Master clarifies that while most were recovered, the most precious artifact of all is still missing. He then presses the issue, asking if Kane truly believes the barbarian was capable of defeating Kartos single-handedly. The old man answers quietly but firmly, if it is that man, then such an impossible feat is indeed possible. Hearing this, the Tower Master stares him down, demanding to know why he hasn't informed the Emperor about such a powerful variable. Kane replies coldly that there is no reason to, as the Emperor already treats talented warriors like disposable tools to be thrown into the demon world. If the Emperor learns of him, a clash is inevitable. A barbarian who follows only his own will versus a tyrant who seeks total control would set the entire kingdom ablaze. Intrigued, the Tower Master asks if he's implying the barbarian could face the entire empire alone, to which Kane admits the outcome is uncertain. However, he confesses that when he met the barbarian, he felt the exact same overwhelming presence he felt when he first met the Emperor. This comparison is enough to genuinely surprise even the stoic mage, and he wonders if the barbarian belongs to the legendary hero class. The old man says it is too early to decide, but the Tower Master has already made his plan for the barbarian. The scene shifts to the crowded streets of the Barcan territory. A woman walking ahead, and nearly falls. But our boy reacts instantly, stepping forward to catch her and stop her from hitting the ground. In a calm manner, he reminds her to be careful and checks if she is unharmed. Usually people flee in fear when they see him, and this time, however, the woman politely bows her head, thanks him, and continues on her way. He stands there for a moment, slightly confused. Looking around, he notices that no one is staring at him like he is some kind of freak. For the first time, it feels like people are no longer afraid of him, and he does not understand why. In his office, the Lord of the Barcan region welcomes our boy. He asks whether he is feeling better now since he narrowly escaped a demon's brand. The barbarian calmly replies that nothing serious happened, then admits that he does not really understand what this brand even is. The Lord listens carefully and thinks to himself that he always knew the barbarian was strong, but defeating a demoness is on another level entirely. He stops himself from dwelling on that thought and explains that things around Catal seem to have changed. When our boy asks if he means the people of the territory, the Lord nods. He explains that the change is likely due to the rumors now spreading everywhere. The guards and mercenaries who survived the incident have begun talking openly, according to these rumors. After Aquas finally collapsed and the dust settled, only a single figure remained standing amidst the unconscious crowd. As the survivors slowly opened their eyes, they saw Lord Barcan, his axe bathed in a radiant, divine light. Rumors instantly took root that the Inquisitor had bestowed her power upon him, hailing him as the hero who fought the demon alongside the saint. Hearing this explanation, our protagonist finally pieces together how the narrative spiraled so far out of control. Lord Barcan offers a sheepish apology, admitting that by the time he tried to correct the record, the tale had already spread through the territory like wildfire. Catal dismisses the apology with a calm wave, noting that the misunderstanding is actually a blessing. It explains why the townsfolk are no longer terrified of his appearance. Barcan nods in agreement, confirming that the public no longer sees a monster, but a warrior who stands on the front lines against the demonic threat. The barbarian pauses to reflect, finally grasping the true weight and value of having a respectable reputation. Later, at the Mercenary Guild, Rosa greets him with a beaming smile, eager to congratulate him on a massive promotion. He is left completely stunned to learn he has skipped 3 entire grades, landing officially as a C-rank mercenary. The receptionist assures him that his recent feats were more than enough to justify such an unprecedented leap in status. It is a rare moment of validation, and the news brings a genuine sense of satisfaction to his heart. She notes that his new identification tag requires custom fabrication, so there will be a brief delay before he receives it. Reaching C rank means official guild certification, commanding a level of respect from others that he has never experienced before. More importantly, this rank grants him unrestricted access to most major cities and churches, with the sole, glaring exception of the imperial capital. Noting the exclusion, he remarks on just how strict and closed off the empire seems to be. Rosa explains that entry is dictated entirely by the nobility, and in truth, the interior of the capital remains a mystery to the common folk. With nothing but terrifying rumors leaking out, the capital has become an enigma even more ominous than the demon realm itself. This revelation hits home, making him realize that the heart of the empire is far more dangerous and secretive than he anticipated. Shifting gears, Rosa clarifies his new privileges. He can accept nearly any request, including A-rank dungeons, provided he joins a party. He nods with a satisfied smile, realizing this promotion finally grants him access to a wider variety of missions. Nearby, Tyrannus raises his glass, admitting he never expected the situation to resolve quite like this. When he asks if the threat is truly gone, our boy insists the credit belongs entirely to the Inquisitor, who confirmed the area is safe. Hearing that the demoness was definitively slain, the man finally lets out a heavy sigh of relief. Cassin praises the Inquisitor's exceptional skill, amazed that she managed to take down a demon single-handedly. However, the priestess stays silent, knowing full well she hadn't lost consciousness during the battle. She saw everything, specifically the brutal efficiency with which the barbarian crushed the demoness, a sight she'll never forget. In her eyes, Aqua merely showed up at the end to take the final bite of a meal Catal had already cooked. Cassin then turns to Catal, asking what he plans to do now that he's secured a promotion. Our boy simply replies that nothing will change. He intends to continue his work exactly as usual. Cassin admires his humility, impressed by how grounded he remains, despite surviving an encounter with a demon. Meanwhile, the priestess screams internally, wishing she could warn him not to be fooled. This barbarian is anything but human. The barbarian then shifts the topic, asking the group about their own plans for the future. Cassin admits that as an F-ranker, he still lacks a clear direction for his life. He confesses that he originally intended to just leech off others like a parasite until the day he died. But after watching Catal, he's inspired to actually put in some effort, a sentiment Tyrannus immediately mocks. He jokes that it's a little late for an epiphany, sparking a glare between them before Catal turns his attention to the priestess. She stiffly replies that she intends to follow Lady Colossia's will, just as she always has. This triggers a memory for Catal. The Inquisitor mentioned that Colossia's lower servants are inactive, with only high-ranking members operating. The priestess is visibly startled by his scrutiny, but quickly tries to compose herself, claiming that the Inquisitor must be mistaken, and that she is just an ordinary priestess. Our boy replies that he will take her word for it. However, the girl can't help but panic, wondering if he already knows everything, and is simply toying with her. Late at night, the mercenary guild is almost empty. Rosa is packing up, preparing to head home. When the door opens and a stranger walks in, wearing a hood, the man says he wants to submit a request. She looks at him with tired eyes, already thinking about overtime, and asks what kind of request it is. The man explains that it is an escort mission for 2 people, himself and a young girl. Rosa begins writing down the details and asks for the destination. When the man says the capital city of the Denian Kingdom, she freezes in shock. An escort mission to such a distant capital from a remote region like Barson is extremely unusual. She studies the man carefully and realizes that something is off, even though she finds him suspicious. She tentatively accepts the request and asks him to present identification. At the request for identity confirmation, the man hesitates briefly, before placing a metal card on the table. The moment Rosa sees it, she understands. It is a mercenary guild token, something that is not easily obtained. She verifies his identity and asks for the commission fee. The mysterious man produces a coin, offering it as his payment. Inspecting it closely, the receptionist realizes it's pure gold, but warns that it's only enough to hire a single guard. The man freezes, completely stunned by the insufficient value. She reminds him that a mercenary is committed for the entire duration of the trip. The Denian Kingdom is distant, the risks are high, and the month-long trek commands a premium price. Desperate, the man pleads for a workaround, insisting that he requires at least 2 bodyguards. The receptionist admits it's possible, but only if he settles for much lower-ranked fighters. However, for actual safety, he really needs to secure mercenaries ranked D or higher. Realizing the danger, the man backpedals, affirming that he needs skilled protection after all. When he begs for another option, she firmly reiterates that his payment only covers 1 competent warrior. Watching him struggle, Rosa wonders why this stranger is so incredibly desperate. Adopting a strict tone, she warns that finding an escort in this remote region is hard, but promises to see what she can do. Defeated, the man sighs heavily and leaves the arrangements in her capable hands. Once he's gone, she examines the payment again. It's small, yet unmistakably pure gold. More concerning is the filed-down surface meant to hide its origin, a clear sign that this job spells trouble. Later that night, the scene shifts to a quiet tavern. We find the same man standing before a private room, knocking gently on the door. From the inside, a golden-haired young woman cautiously asks for the visitor's identity. The man identifies himself as Aaron, declaring himself to be her humble and loyal servant. Hearing his voice, Aline unlocks the door and quickly ushers him inside. Back inside the room, she anxiously asks how the meeting went. Aaron explains that the guild accepted their request, prompting a sigh of relief as she asks how many people they managed to hire. He hesitates before admitting that their funds could only secure a single mercenary, a fact that instantly reignites her worry. He apologizes profusely, explaining that their remaining budget simply wasn't enough, although the girl insists that he isn't to blame. However, Aaron is consumed by guilt, feeling responsible for the scam that drained their savings. Overwhelmed, they look at each other with teary eyes and begin wailing so loudly that an angry neighbor shouts through the wall for them to keep it down. They exchange helpless glances, realizing the tragic reality that they cannot even cry in peace. Elin asks how long the process will take, but he admits he doesn't know, as finding someone reliable is a gamble. Resigned to the situation, she accepts his answer and thanks him for his efforts. Time passes and the scene shifts to the following night. Elin paces around the room filled with anxiety, while Aaron wallows in shame, having failed to secure a guard yet again. Their food supplies are running dangerously low, and he is convinced that their suffering is entirely his fault. Once again, she steps in to reassure him that he isn't the one to blame. Running out of options, Aaron suggests informing the territory's lord about their desperate situation, but she immediately shuts him down, insisting that no one can be trusted and that even hiring a bodyguard is a massive risk. She reminds him why they were forced to flee their kingdom, emphasizing that they can never know who is a friend and who is an enemy. Even after all this time in hiding, not a single scrap of news has arrived from their homeland. The man apologizes, admitting that his resolve has weakened recently. However, the girl questions if seeking refuge in the Denian kingdom is truly safe. Her guardian answers with absolute confidence, believing the kingdom will offer them sanctuary. He recalls the oath the king swore at her birth, suggesting they might even aid in their future revenge. He insists that she must survive, for if she falls, their entire nation is truly doomed. Still skeptical, the princess questions if they can really trust their lives to a single mercenary. The man reassures her, noting that their payment in gold ensures the guild will send someone reliable. With her worries eased, she starts to imagine just who this bodyguard might be. She secretly crosses her fingers, hoping for a dashing knight-like hero. Elsewhere, our hero sits alone in his room, completely bored with nothing to do. His mind drifts back to his old comrades who once stood beside him in the snowy wastes. They were the ones who never abandoned him, and he trusts they haven't changed a bit. Suddenly, a thought strikes him, making him wonder if his mission is finally over. Ever since waking up in that frozen hellscape, the mission window had guided him, though he initially thought it was a dream. But the biting cold and monsters proved it was real, starting with his first task to survive for a week. Back then, the system was his lifeline, but since leaving the snowfields, no new orders have appeared. Now that the danger has passed, the sudden calm is actually making him restless. He begins to wonder if the system's quests were limited strictly to the snowfield. Regardless, he feels grateful for the help and decides to finally enjoy this world in his own way. The next day, the narrative shifts to the bustling mercenary guild, where Rosa hands him a fresh request. When he inquires about the nature of the mission, she explains that it is strictly an escort job. The journey will span several days, and all travel preparations are the sole responsibility of the mercenary. Hearing this, Catal notes that this will require some serious effort. The receptionist agrees, but adds that the payout is equally substantial. However, the whole setup feels too shady to be a simple errand. Just as she begins to tell him that he has the option to decline, he cuts her off, admitting that the suspicious nature is exactly what makes it interesting. As the barbarian reviews the details once more, the name of the destination instantly catches his eye. He recalls hearing that specific location before, from a girl named Milena of the Akasha family. She was the one he met in the snowy plains who promised he would be welcome there. Realizing this is the perfect opportunity, Catal decides to accept the request, but at that moment, a bright blue system window suddenly materializes before him. He freezes in shock as quest number 785 flashes into view, stating that the objective is to escort the client to the denying kingdom. He stands there in disbelief, wondering why the interface has returned after so long, prompting a concerned Rosa to call out to him. The scene then shifts to the princess, who rushes toward the door at the sound of hurried footsteps. As she pulls the door open, Aaron bursts inside, panting heavily from exertion. Fear instantly grips her, and she frantically asks if the trackers have tracked them down. But Aaron quickly waves off her panic, revealing that their request has actually been accepted. Her confusion lingers until he excitedly clarifies that the region's only C-rank mercenary has agreed to take the job. A massive wave of relief washes over her, and hope finally returns to her eyes. He confirms the good news and schedules the meeting for tomorrow, urging her to get some much-needed rest. Meanwhile, back with Catal, he stares silently at the mission window hovering in the air before him. He can't help but wonder why the system has suddenly reactivated after lying dormant for so long. As he mulls over the strange occurrence, a sudden realization begins to dawn on him. Perhaps the system's missions aren't strictly limited to the white snowfield after all. His expression darkens as he considers the possibility that a much deeper force is manipulating the system. Later, outside the mercenary guild, a heavy thunderstorm begins to brew. Aline and the old man sit in tense silence within the guild, waiting for their savior. The princess finds herself wondering exactly what kind of warrior is about to walk through that door. She envisions a rugged brute with sharp features and a body covered in battle scars. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps echoes, and the door swings open. Rosa announces that the mercenary has finally arrived. But just as the princess turns around to get a look at him, she freezes. She notices a terrifying giant staring straight back at her. The sight leaves her so petrified that she practically turns into a sketch on a page. The mere thought of this monster serving as their guard causes her to faint on the spot. As she collapses, the old man panics and screams at our boy, demanding to know who he is. Catal calmly observes the chaotic situation and begins to process the reaction. He realizes that it has been a long time since he has seen someone look so terrified. He asks Rosa if these two are the clients who hired him, and she nods in confirmation. She then formally introduces the Barbarian as their official escort. Hearing this, the old man explodes with rage, demanding that the guild change the mercenary immediately. The receptionist shoots him a cold glare, asking if he dares to doubt the guild's decision. She warns that questioning their judgment will void the contract, forcing a desperate Aaron to instantly backpedal. In that moment, our boy realizes that he has once again become a walking source of fear. Suddenly, the princess stands up and announces that she fully agrees with the guild's decision. The Barbarian is slightly surprised as she steps forward with resolve. She introduces herself politely and says she looks forward to working with him. The scene soon shifts to the outskirts of a forest. Our boy leads the way, but stops to mention that they should walk closer instead of lagging so far behind. Both of them look visibly nervous, quickly denying that there is any problem at all. They laugh awkwardly, with the old man adding that they haven't seen anyone suspicious so far. Our boy nods, deciding that as long as they are comfortable, he won't press the issue. He turns back around and continues leading the way, making sure to keep a respectful distance ahead of them. The princess stares at his broad back, reflecting on the strange turn of events that led them here. Her mind drifts back to their tense meeting at the mercenary guild just the night before. The Barbarian had made it clear that from that moment on, they needed to place their trust in him. He swore their safety was guaranteed under his watch, though she had nodded with a heart full of doubt. Suddenly, Catal's voice snaps her back to reality as he announces that they'll be camping here for the night. He explains that it's getting too late to continue, and the visibility is dropping rapidly. It's hardly surprising, considering they only set out on this mission earlier that evening. Reluctantly, the pair exchange glances and nod in agreement. Our boy notices their hesitation, realizing their fear of barbarians runs far deeper than he initially anticipated. Turning away, he accepts that breaking down these prejudices is going to be a long-term struggle. Putting those thoughts aside, he begins preparing a suitable spot for them to rest. He activates the magical artifact he was gifted, ready to retrieve some supplies. He pulls out a massive tent and sets it on the ground, leaving the princess and the old man completely flabbergasted. Aaron exclaims in disbelief, unable to comprehend how a mere barbarian could possess such a high-tier item. Our boy calmly explains that he earned the treasure as a reward, after completing countless dangerous commissions. This revelation leaves them stunned into silence once again. He notes that there's only one tent for them to share, prompting the princess to hesitantly ask where he intends to sleep. He replies that sleeping under the stars is nothing new to him. Compared to the frozen wastelands, this is practically paradise. He offers to stand guard all night, recalling a month in the snowfields where he was hunted by monsters without a wink of sleep. Yet despite his confident reassurance, the girl refuses, insisting that he shouldn't overwork himself on their account. They debate the matter for a while until he finally relents and agrees to rest. However, he regrets backing down, as he had hoped this gesture would earn their trust. In reality, the pair is terrified to let their guard down, fearing he might murder them in their sleep. The next morning, the princess emerges from her tent looking exhausted, her anxiety having ruined her rest. She sees that the old man is equally fatigued, and both are absolute starving. The barbarian notices them and asks if they're hungry, noting that it's only natural since they haven't had a proper meal yet. The princess stares in shock as he tells them to wait while he whips up some breakfast. Moments later, he places a pan over the open flame and adds oil. With practiced ease, he begins prepping the ingredients. Both she and Aaron stand there, completely dumbfounded. They can't wrap their heads around the idea of a barbarian who knows culinary arts. Bewildered, the old man asks if he actually learned how to cook in the past. Our boy casually replies that it's simply a hobby of his. He explains that in the snowfields, people usually survived on raw meat and monster blood. However, he took those same harsh ingredients and taught himself to cook them, despite the risks. He recalls how difficult it was to start fires and prepare food in such a hostile environment. Yet, after countless failed attempts, he eventually mastered the craft. Now fully confident in his ability to cook anywhere, he whips up a flawless shrimp pasta dish and proudly presents it to them. The two are left speechless at the sight, even though the meal looks absolutely delicious. However, the girl immediately refuses, claiming she is fine and actually dislikes cooked food. Instead, she pulls out some dry jerky, insisting that she will only eat her rations. Following her lead, the old man quickly agrees to do the same. Confused, our hero asks if they really prefer jerky, shrugging as he realizes he'll be dining alone. Deep down, the princess wants to join him, but she simply cannot bring herself to trust a barbarian. Days pass, and by the third night of their journey, she finds herself tossing and turning in the tent, completely exhausted and gnawed by hunger. The old man watches her, deeply concerned for her well-being, realizing she hasn't had a proper meal in 3 days on this harsh road. He blames himself, knowing how difficult this deprivation must be for someone of noble upbringing. The princess offers a faint smile, assuring him she's fine and apologizing for causing him worry. He bows his head respectfully, telling her there is absolutely no need to apologize. She gently asks about his condition, noting that he must be fatigued from standing guard all night. Aaron brushes it off, joking that old men don't need much sleep anyway. As she finally drifts off to sleep, he remains vigilant, watching over her, finally convinced that he would sacrifice his own life for her safety. The next day, our boy is busy by the fire, grilling up a feast of meat and fish. The other two sit quietly at a distance, picking at their own meager rations. However, the mouth-watering aroma is simply too much for the princess to bear. Suddenly, she stands and announces that she needs to step away for a moment. The barbarian asks if she needs the restroom, which shocks her into calling him rude. Realizing his social blunder, he quickly apologizes for the comment. This catches her off guard, since barbarians aren't exactly known for their remorse. She quietly excuses herself and heads into the woods, leaving the men to watch in silence. The old man remains seated, internally worrying about his princess. Noticing the mood, our boy calmly admits he knows they don't fully trust him yet. He continues turning the meat on the grill, keeping his focus on the cooking. He reminds the elder that he is human too, and capable of feeling hurt by their suspicion. Aaron is stunned by this vulnerability and slowly lowers his head in shame, nodding to acknowledge that he understands. Catal turns back to the fire and offers the old man a plate of grilled venison. The old man's eyes widen at the 5-star presentation, hesitating before he accepts it. Meanwhile, the princess sits alone by the stream, wallowing in misery. Her hunger is so intense that she forces herself to gnaw on the dried meat. Her legs throb with weakness, leaving her completely drained and on the verge of collapse. But she forces herself to push through the pain, resolving to get back up and be stronger for the old man's sake. However, the moment she returns to the camp, she freezes, completely shocked by the scene before her. The old man and the barbarian are sitting side by side, casually feasting on the meat the stranger prepared. In fact, the old man is devouring the grilled steak with such intensity that he seems oblivious to the world around him. Furious, she calls out to him sharply, catching him completely off guard. He jumps up in a panic, frantically shouting that this is all just a big misunderstanding. But before the old man can even explain himself, she steps forward, scolding him for forgetting their pact to stay vigilant against the barbarian and protect each other. Aaron cuts her off before she can spiral further. He insists that this barbarian might not be the dangerous monster they initially feared. Hearing this leaves her utterly confused, but at that exact moment, our boy finally speaks up, advising her to take a deep breath and calm down. He correctly deduces that their refusal of his food and their strict night watch schedule stemmed entirely from a lack of trust. Aaron hangs his head in guilt, admitting his mistake, while the princess nervously tries to deny the accusation. Our boy contemplates the awkward situation, trying to figure out the best way to bridge this gap. He reflects on the deep-seated prejudice against his kind, realizing that while he's ignorant of the outside world, other barbarians must have done terrible things to earn such hatred. He knows that simply pleading his case won't work given their fear. But suddenly, a brilliant idea strikes him. He steps forward and announces that there has been a massive misunderstanding, leaving both of them staring in confusion. With total confidence, our boy looks them in the eye and declares that he isn't actually a barbarian. Catal decides to spin a narrative, clarifying that while he was technically born a barbarian, he wasn't raised as one. Both of the girls are left completely dumbfounded, staring at him in utter confusion. Our boy recounts a tragic backstory, claiming his entire tribe was wiped out a week after his birth, and that a wandering adventurer found him and raised him as a civilized human. Of course, internally he admits he is just making this entire sob story up on the spot. He reflects that a well-timed lie is often the best medicine, framing himself as a cultured man with a savage origin. Upon hearing this explanation, the princess finally begins to lower her guard. Catal acknowledges that it's a lot to process, but hopes she will eventually see that he is just like them. He knows he's spewing absolute nonsense, but his goal is to manufacture sympathy, and it's working. The princess begins to realize how judgmental she was to reject his kindness earlier, solely because she had branded him as a barbarian. Shame floods her face as she quietly offers an apology, admitting that until now, she hadn't truly trusted him at all. Instead of taking offense, he gives her a gentle smile and assures her that everything is fine. This simple reassurance melts away the tension, and she visibly sighs in relief. Catal conceals a smirk of victory, noting that his manipulation was a complete success. Capitalizing on her guilt, our boy reaches out and suggests that from now on, she can place her faith in him. The princess freezes for a heartbeat, caught off guard, before smiling back and accepting his hand. While this unfolds, a shadow lurks nearby. A mysterious figure stalks them from the trees, the tower master we glimpsed earlier. Peering through his eye of observation, he is stunned that a barbarian as capable as Catal exists. He wonders what secrets lie within the white wasteland to produce such a refined individual. Troubled by this anomaly, he decides to creep closer for a better look. But suddenly, our hero's instincts flare, and he snaps his gaze toward the trees. The tower master freezes in panic, unsure if he's actually been spotted. The princess notices the sudden shift in his demeanor and asks what's wrong. With eerie calm, he warns her of an intruder and tells her to hold her ground. Moving with blinding speed, he launches himself into the air, descending on the mage like an apex predator. The tower master's eyes widen in sheer terror. He desperately erects a flame barrier to protect himself, but it's futile. The barbarian smashes straight through the defense, scattering magical debris in all directions. The tower master's mind races in total disbelief. He screams internally, refusing to believe what just happened. That shield was strong enough to stop a ballista, yet it shattered instantly. In the blink of an eye, he finds himself pinned to the dirt like a common criminal. The barbarian coldly threatens to snap his neck if he tries anything stupid. Cornered and out of options, the tower master suddenly blurts out that he admires him. Completely baffled, our boy asks if the mage is actually talking about him. The man quickly nods, and when asked for his identity, the disguised tower master offers the name Patrick. Moments later, the barbarian hoists him up like a rag doll and hauls him over to the campsite. Dangling helplessly, the mage wonders if this is how Cain was treated as well. Just then, the princess approaches Catal to ask about their new captive. He explains that the guy was stalking them, but now claims to be nothing more than an enthusiastic admirer. The explanation leaves her looking even more confused than before. Patrick quickly interjects, explaining that he's always dreamed of becoming a powerful adventurer. He insists that he looks up to the barbarian as his ultimate role model, especially after witnessing him assist the Inquisitors in their battle against demons. Of course, every word is a lie. The tower master simply concocted the story to get closer to the barbarian. Hearing this sob story, our boy asks one last time if that really is the only reason he was following them. Feigning innocence, the tower master flashes a harmless smile and insists he just couldn't help himself. Despite the flattery, the barbarian decides he can't just release a potential threat without knowing if he's safe. Suddenly, a brilliant idea strikes him, and a wicked grin spreads across his face. Here we have one of the greatest mages of all time, the head of the magic tower. A lich disguised as a human named Patrick solely to observe this barbarian. However, his plan has backfired spectacularly, leaving him bound and at the mercy of the very man he meant to study. After ensuring the knots are tight and secure, our boy announces that it is time to get moving. The group continues down the forest path, dragging a reluctant Patrick along for the ride. Now that he's closer, he takes a moment to properly analyze the barbarian. Suddenly, Cain's earlier warnings make perfect sense. Catal operates on a completely different tier of speed and raw power, possessing enough might to shatter magic with nothing but physical force. It forces him to question whether this barbarian belongs to the legendary hero class. Just then, the princess quietly calls his name, causing him to pause. Glancing over his shoulder, he calmly asks if she's finally ready to spill the truth. She freezes in shock, realizing that he was aware of her deception the entire time. Our boy explains that it was fairly obvious she and her guards were concealing something. However, he sympathizes with her position, noting how difficult it is to trust a stranger. The princess offers a sincere apology and admits she's ready to come clean. Once she explains, he can decide whether or not to abandon the mission. But before she can utter another word, he cuts her off, sensing an approaching presence nearby. Moments later, a squad of armored knights emerges from the tree line. The princess's eyes widen in recognition, though not with joy. The knight commander steps forward, bowing politely as he introduces himself as Lucento Edenheimer. Turning to the princess, he claims they've been desperately searching to return her to the kingdom. Yet instead of relief, a look of pure dread washes over her face. Lucento exposes her identity as the first princess of the Luton Kingdom, explaining that she is a fugitive who fled her home. Mistaking the barbarian for a mere mercenary, the commander announces that his squad will take it from here. However, the princess instantly digs her heels in, flatly refusing to go anywhere with him. Adopting a severe tone, she demands to know exactly who he thinks he is. Caught off guard by this interrogation, the commander confusedly asks what she implies. Clenching her fists in rage, she asks him one more time to identify himself. He begins to state his full title, but before he can even finish the sentence, she screams that she doesn't recognize him, accusing him of being a monster posing as the knight commander. She claims this same phenomenon has already claimed her friends and even her own parents. The Tower Master finds this development intriguing and inspects the knight's status for himself. Surprisingly, the knight registers as a genuine human, making the situation even more perplexingly complex. Meanwhile, the princess continues her wild accusations, claiming he intends to devour her and the kingdom. The knight commander simply watches in silence as she screams about taking her revenge. He eventually turns to his subordinates, solemnly remarking that Her Highness has lost her mind. This dismissal only fuels her fury further, but he counters by asking if she truly believes she is the only person in the castle who hasn't changed. That question hits home, causing her to pause as she struggles to find an answer. Seizing the moment, the knight commander extends his hand and urges her to return with him. The princess freezes in place, completely paralyzed by fear, but in her mind, she refuses to let it end like this. Just as the commander is about to reach her, our boy steps directly between them, shielding her and taking everyone by surprise. The commander warns him to step aside, but he respectfully refuses to budge. Left with no other choice, the knight commander charges forward, only for our boy to grab him by the helmet and toss him backward like a ragdoll. The other knights stare in horror at their leader's instant defeat. In his defense, the barbarian is just protecting his client, so the violence is justified. The commander struggles back up, asking if he actually believes the girl's story. The barbarian replies that as a mercenary, trusting his employer is part of the job. For some reason, these words send a jolt of emotion through the princess. Hearing this, the knight commander scoffs that they are all delusional. Our boy smiles, noting that the knight is the last person who should be talking, before glancing back toward the princess. He reveals that the knights appeared with zero presence, as if they just materialized in the forest. This detail shocks even the Tower Master, who sensed the exact same thing. Our boy turns to the enemy squad, asking how they managed to appear so suddenly. However, instead of answering, the knight commander ignores the query entirely, simply declaring that they are taking the princess. The barbarian realizes their silence is the only answer he's going to get. He declares that he will escort her to the kingdom of Danian personally. The princess lowers her gaze, disheartened by the situation, remembering that no one in her own castle ever believed a word she said. The knight commander accepts that this conflict cannot be solved with dialogue. Catal senses the shift in the air and orders everyone to step back. It turns out the men he is facing are the kingdom's most elite knights. Yet, even as they unsheath their swords for battle, he simply holds his ground with a confident grin on his face. Watching from the sidelines, the Tower Master analyzes the enemy forces, noting that while the soldiers are merely second-rate users of mystic arts, their commander is a first-rate threat. Suddenly, the order to charge is given, and the knights rush in with lethal intent. Our hero stands immovable, like a towering mountain, and begins smashing through their ranks with nothing but his bare hands. His punches are so devastating that the impact creates shockwaves, pushing the knights back. Even after watching his subordinates get sent flying, the commander orders the remaining troops to press the attack. In response, the barbarian grabs two of them by their helmets and spins them around like human weapons. The impact sends the rest of the squad flying, but while he is momentarily distracted, the knight commander seizes the opening to ambush him from behind. The princess screams out a warning, but her fear quickly turns to disbelief. Our boy channels his inner Saitama, catching the steel blade with his teeth and shattering it. After witnessing such an absurd display of raw power, the commander makes the only logical tactical decision available, and immediately orders his men to retreat. Once the dust settles, the princess rushes to check on him, though he assures her he's unscathed. He reaffirms his promise to help them, but demands the full truth in return. With a heavy sigh, she agrees, leading the way back to their tent to explain everything. The Tower Master reflects on Aura, the crystallization of mysticism capable of slicing steel and severing magic. By all known laws of physics, nothing in this world should be able to simply neutralize it. Yet reality just shattered before his eyes. A mere barbarian stopped an aura-infused blade with his teeth, and didn't suffer so much as a scratch on his skin. Later, as they gather around the campfire, our boy presses them again for the story behind their plight. The old man reveals a chilling truth. Their kingdom hasn't just fallen, it has been replaced. By the time he and the princess noticed the anomaly, the collapse was already irreversible. The barbarian asks if this corruption is the true reason they were forced to flee. Aaron admits that staying behind would have meant being overwritten, just like everyone else. His voice trembles as he reveals this began a year ago, causing a sudden shift in our hero's expression. He wonders if this is merely a coincidence, recalling similar details mentioned by the Inquisitor. During their previous mission, she warned him about the abnormal dungeon spawns and the strange entities invading their world. It all began a year ago, though he hadn't given the information much thought back then. Yet it aligns perfectly with the odd rumors he heard during his recent quest in the snowy wastelands. His train of thought is cut short as the old man presses on with his grim tale. Sensing that something was wrong, he and the princess ordered the court mages to launch an investigation. But they never found the cause. The only tangible change was in the demeanor of the people themselves. When Katal asks how they managed to spot the difference in the first place, the old man lowers his gaze, admitting that the feeling is difficult to put into words. Even though they spoke and acted the same, their very presence became suffocating and unbearable. Hearing this, our hero asks if they were relying solely on their intuition. The old man confesses he was skeptical when the princess first mentioned it, until he started witnessing it firsthand. His role was to manage and supervise the castle's servants, so he knew them well. Among them was a particularly timid girl named Cassie. She was once fragile enough to be terrified by simple ghost stories, but suddenly, she stopped reacting entirely. Initially, he dismissed it, assuming she had simply outgrown her childish fears. However, a subsequent incident completely changed his perspective. Her duties included maintaining the heavy statues, and given her anxious nature, she constantly feared they might topple over and crush her. However, one day her worst nightmare came true, and a massive statue came crashing down. She barely managed to dodge the strike in time, yet her only concern was the punishment she might receive for failing. In that split second, he realized the girl standing before him wasn't actually Cassie. Although her mannerisms were identical, he could tell she was an entirely different entity. After testing this theory on others in the castle, he discovered that most had already been replaced. This terrifying realization is exactly why they fled, fearing they might be the next victims. However, our protagonist is still puzzled about why they're specifically targeting the Danian kingdom for refuge. The princess explains that the king of Danian possesses the unique ability to make a human declaration. Ages ago, humanity lived alongside various other species without distinction, but one man harbored a desire to establish a kingdom exclusively for humans. He beseeched an unknown god to grant his wish, and as a result, he was bestowed with a gift. He gained the supernatural power to instantly distinguish between humans and non-humans. That man became the founder of Danian, and his descendants inherited the ability to expose imposters. Our boy grins, amused that such convenient magic actually exists in this world. He correctly guesses their plan is to use that power to secure undeniable proof, agreeing that it's a solid strategy. The princess glances at him with concern, asking if he is truly comfortable with this course of action. But he simply assures her that nothing has changed regarding their original agreement. Relieved, she offers her sincere thanks and promises to grant him any reward he desires once the mission is complete. The barbarian flashes a smile, telling her that he'll definitely be looking forward to collecting that prize. The old man, however, seems to have a completely different reaction to the conversation. Later, once the others have drifted off to sleep, our boy sits with the tower master, who questions if he truly believes the princess. He admits that while he isn't certain, her story remains a possibility. The tower master grimly reveals that the knights they fought were actually human, but our protagonist is already well aware of that fact. To make matters worse, he has effectively antagonized an entire nation. Even if the princess is telling the truth, he could face severe consequences simply for involving himself in this mess. The old man questions if he really accepted this contract merely to serve as an escort. After a brief heavy silence, our boy stands up and admits that the escort job isn't his primary motivation. He simply believes it would be a tragedy to miss out on a story this interesting. The tower master breaks into a cold sweat, realizing that this entire crisis is nothing more than a game to this monster.